So I'd like to take a quick minute and just introduce some of the staff from the cooperative that are here today. For Vermont, we've got Dylan Sickles. He's the head of our fish culture program. Again, I'm Eric Palmer. I'm the fish chief for Vermont. Bertie Pientka, fish biologist out of Essex. Shawn, a fish biologist out of the Rutland office. Margaret Murphy, who's the fish program manager out of the Rutland office. And Dylan is statewide for fish culture, but these other folks are really focused on the western half of Vermont and Lake Champlain. Do we have any other Vermont staff here? Dan? Yeah, Dan will be doing video. He's done that in the past. This room has really poor acoustics. We try and record all of the sessions and put them up on YouTube so that folks that are interested in what's on the agenda here today can go in afterwards and watch. And so we're trying to capture the sessions, the presentations on audio. So there might be times where we just ask folks to quiet down a little bit, or Dan will be hearing more about somebody's fishing trip rather than the presentation.
Eric, got one more.
Oh, Dylan. Dylan runs our fishing access area program for the state of Vermont. Yeah, thanks for coming, Dylan.
All right, you want to introduce some of the New York bar?
Sure, I'm Steve Hurst. I'm Chief of Fisheries for New York State. To my right is Rob Fiorentino. He's our Region 5 Fisheries Manager. All the way down the end is Nicole Balk. She's our dedicated Lake Champlain Fisheries Biologist.
Steve, could you introduce?
Sure. Deep, Fish and Wildlife Service. I manage the sea lamprey control program, and Fish and Wildlife Service biologist Dave Minkoff is here with us today. He works on aquatic organism passage. I'm mostly on the New York side of the Lake Champlain Basin, and Kurt Heinz, who heads up our salmon program at the office.
Great, thanks. And Janelle, I saw Janelle come in and leave. She is. Janelle, could you just say a couple of words about you and your role?
Sure. Folks, I'm Janelle Hangen. I'm with the Great Lakes Fishery Commission, and I'm based in Vermont, but we work on Lake Champlain and Lake Montague and support a lot of the work that we're going to talk about today. And baby here. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Janelle. I think a lot of folks know that Senator Leahy was really instrumental in getting a lot of funding for work on Lake Champlain. And a lot of that came through the Great Lakes Fishery Commission, starting out with sea lamprey control work back in the 80s and 90s, and then expanding to all sorts of fisheries research and management work. So really happy to have that partnership. And we've got a couple of folks from UBM in the back. Ethan, Thais, just introduce yourselves quickly.
Hi, I'm Jason Stockwell. I'm at UBM Derivatives Steam Lab down on the waterfront next to Echo. We have the Marcel Melisira research vessel, so we do a lot of fisheries work on lake. L'Ariel, Ellen Marsden, so we work closely with Hurst, good colleague, recently hired. So we're trying to raise our mark up to what Ellen's efforts has been over the years. So hopefully we'll keep doing that. High bar. Great high bar.
Hi everyone, my name is Thais and I'm also a professor at the University of Vermont in the Bulgar. I do research on fish and then teach about fish as well. And some more folks from UVM as well there.
Yeah, I know a lot of you, but I'm Graham. I do salmon research. I'm a PhD student with the University of Montreal's the co-op unit they had there. Hey, I'm Taylor. I'm the captain on the RV Marcel Melisira.
Great. Thanks, everyone. A couple of housekeeping items. We've got some snacks in the back. Bathrooms are out and around the corner there. And we've got a pretty full agenda. So we'll just move through it. We'll do the talks. There'll be an opportunity for some Q&A at the end of some of the sessions. And we'll try and record that as well as we can, but again, the acoustics in here are really poor, so the speakers might repeat the questions just so that if folks are watching it later on YouTube, they'll be able to hear it. With that, I'll turn it over to Margaret to run the program.
All right. Thanks, Eric. Again, welcome everybody. I'm going to get us started. We do have several presentations this morning. We're going to try to do it where we leave a few minutes after each one for Q&A, and then we'll have Q&A at the end of the day here as well. So I'd like to first introduce Bernie Pientka, who's going to give us an introduction on all of this, as well as an overview of the lake trout.
All right, thanks everyone for coming today. As I already mentioned, I'm Bernie Pientka. Most of my work I do on Lake Champlain, everything from walleye, salmon, bass, perch, and I was responsible for a lot of the forage fish historically. Today I'm going to kind of give a brief overview of the cooperative, kind of some of the work we're doing, and then kind of tie everything together and leading us into some of those talks that we'll get into. As I already mentioned, we have the Lake Champlain Fish and Wildlife Management Cooperative, made up of the 3 groups. We have U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Vermont Fish and Wildlife, and we have New York State DEC. I also want to acknowledge that a lot of my work funding comes through the Sportfish Wildlife Restoration Fund, so that funds a lot of my time and work. So what are we doing? Well, in the past year, we've kind of updated our strategic plan. We're working on right now an annual report we do for our fisheries technical report, which kind of summarizes the work we did the past year and kind of develops into some of our salmonid indicators. I'll go over each of these topics after this, so I'm going to kind of be short in this starting point. The salmonid indicators are used to kind of help guide what are we seeing in the system, where are we going, how are things looking. And then those indicators, along with the work we do, is driving management decisions. And we'll talk about a couple of our recent management decisions that occurred. So our strategic plan, well, we finished it up. It's a 5-year plan. In February, we wrapped it up. The scope of the plan is basically to highlight and focus the intersect of the priority efforts of the cooperative, and basically that group of the 3 of us. And then basically it's a roadmap to accomplishments for valuable work towards the cooperative goals. So those are kind of big pictures, but this strategic plan is really that overarching component of what we're doing as the cooperative. And we lead into, a nice vision statement, Lake Champlain with a robust native fish population that supports an ecological integrity of the lake and provides quality fishing opportunities. So kind of the overarching goals of that. And we have a group of guiding principles. I'm not going to get into everyone, but we have a bunch of these principles that we set up. Strategic stocking. We want to focus on, high quality fishing opportunities that kind of guide the work that's going on. And if we take that kind of technical, this is here's what we did kind of area into that point. So our fisheries technical reports are done annually. Last year, we completed a 5-year summary that talked about all the work over times and looked at different trends. And we are working on our new one that's actually will probably be coming out in another couple months that talks about the work we did in 2025. Now we take that information, the work, the summaries, and we basically generate, this is a scorecard. We end up looking at, and these are our measures. We have a group of measures for, trying not to catch on the cord here. Upper ones are going to be our salmon measures, things like the size of smolts at stocking. We have condition factor, wounding rates. We have some measures from derbies like the LCI, as well as some measures from our assessments. We have some lake trout values that deal with adults. We have some lake trout values that deal with juvenile lake trout, and then some of our summer gill netting targets. So again, all that work that goes on, we bring it in together into the scorecard, looking at, and this happens to be from some of the 5-year trends where we are. So a circle in the center means that we're right within our range. We have a value that we're looking for between 2 points. And then an arrow would indicate, well, we're having a downtrend. We have a little problem. We're below that target. So it gives us some guidance to go. We look at these trends as well as the full data to end up guiding our management decisions. What have we been doing? What has occurred for management decisions recently? Well, as many of you guys know, the lake trout wild production has gone up. We've gone through multiple years, had done some stocking reductions to the point where 2025 was our last lake trout stocking. So there's no lake trout going in this year. We're continuing to monitor a lot of the resources, basically setting ourselves up that we have to make a decision and make a change, that we're ready for that. We've had some more renewed discussions on forage fish. I'll talk about some of the values we saw for lake trout condition factor, relative weight later. But some of the values we saw brought more interest to rethinking and looking at some of our forage fish assessments. So we've been having discussions. We actually had a good meeting yesterday, kind of looking at some of the past surveys that we did, as well as some new surveys that were completed from UVM. And then potentially we're looking to develop our plan in the future. We believe that forage fish is an important understanding we need as we start managing the system, especially with lake trout becoming a naturally reproducing, self-sustaining population. And then we have many other studies. There's a lot of talks in the remainder part of the day that we're going to go over and kind of give us a little test of. Often those studies are related to how do we improve our stocking? How do we make things better so that the fish we put in there survive better and they result in returning to the fishery? And as I can see, here's a kind of a quick run through of everything that's on the agenda. Lots of great talks we're going to go into and get a lot of information out there for everyone. That's where I kind of wrapped it up for the introduction, more of what the cooperative is. I'd want to kind of open it up for any questions people might have on the cooperative on some of those bigger picture scales before I get into the lake trout specific.
Yeah. Maybe it's an ignorant question. Seems like just a few years ago, there was talk of the lake trout really weren't naturally spawning at all. So now you're saying they're fully self-sustaining. And what have I missed in the intro?
So I'll get into the lake trout talk when I have some background and laying some of that out. But basically for 60 years, they've been stocked in the lake. And we were seeing very little reproduction, natural reproduction, successful natural reproduction. And that changed in around 2015 or so, 2015. There started to be enough of that population. We see those trends continue. So we're not exactly sure of the reason why. We can talk about alewives. We can talk about some other things that might have changed the system. But they're there, and we're continuing to monitor. We are now to the point where we have wild fish that are now actively spawning. So that's a big step, and that's where some of those decisions were to end stocking. All right, so going to talk about the status of lake trout. Kind of for background on lake trout, we had the populations depleted in the 1800s. They are extirpated from the lake in the early 1900s. We started a stocking program in 58. It got up and running pretty much from the 1960s to 2010. They were basically supporting the fishery. Our stocking was occurring. When you took fish, if you actually took eggs and hatched them out in the hatchery, the eggs were viable, but we weren't seeing fish recruiting to the population. Basically, everything we stock gets a fin clip, and we weren't seeing fish out there that didn't have fin clips, or at least the percentage was very, very small, which could have been a missed fin clip. In 2011 to 2019, researchers, pretty much Alan Marsden, was doing a lot of work on bottom trawling for juvenile lake trout in Lake Champlain and started to find wild lake trout. We continue to watch what she was doing, watch that continuing numbers as the numbers kept coming up. In 2020, we started a summer gillnet survey that really had a major purpose of focusing on seeing how that percentage of wild was moving into the adult population and follow that through time. By 2022, we saw more of that wild production. We did our first stocking reduction, 82,000 down to 57,000. By 2024, we were making another reduction as we saw more and more of those wild fish appearing up to the point again where they were spawning. So we now have those wild fish spawning. And then 2025 was our last stocking. So 2026, we have no stocking planned. Kind of just as a graphical representation of those numbers, we had that target around 80,000, 81,000. These are actual numbers, so that the hatch production is up and down a little bit. We had our first drop, second drop, and 2026, no more stocking. But again, we're not walking away from the situation. We're still looking at the information. We're still collecting that on a regular basis. So we're basically trying to actively manage that fishery and be ready in case we need to make a change. Our assessments consist of three major focuses. We have a spring juvenile bottom trawl survey. We have our summer gillnet survey. Then we have our fall spawning, a trap net and an electrofishing that we use to collect information to kind of build into that indicators build into those management decisions. If we look at our Burlington Bay, this is our bottom trawling survey. The earlier data, 16 through 19, was basically work done by UVM. We're using the same nets or same gear that they were using, and Vermont has kind of taken that over to continue that. So in 2023, 2024, you can see this increasing trend of these age 2 fish. So the net is really geared to collecting these age 2 lake trout. Once you start getting age 3 and older, they start kind of outfishing the net, outswimming the net. And then the age 1s, while we'll get them, there's some issue where they can go through the mesh of the net. So our primary assessment is these age 2, and kind of some of the photos here. You're kind of, it's more on the medium size there. There's a couple bigger ones, but it's like that one that's most of the fish. This cord is going to kill me it's kind of like getting into these size fish that are in there. So again, high numbers. These are catch rates of wild fish, no fin clips. So we're seeing that trend continue in a really positive way out there, which is kind of that reason for that reduction and ending of our stocking program.
Bernie, are you saying the 3-year-old is a 15 to 20?
I'd have to do it in millimeters. It's like 300. It's a little smaller than that. Again, spring. So there's a lot of growth that goes on that summer. But we see in the gill netting, we have a value of 360 millimeters is what our net starts to effectively catch. And those are getting into the 3 and 4-year-olds. Depending on, males grow differently than females and all that component.
The last couple of years, we've been catching an enormous amount of shorts.
Yeah. Which is likely that as that graph shows. Yeah. I mean, what we're seeing here is what you guys are seeing is that these are these young fish coming into that system, and they're likely now, when they start getting to that 5 and 6 and 7, that's when they're starting to spawn. So, this is what we're kind of preparing for by being proactive. And, I didn't get into the life history on lake trout, but understand we have lake trout like up to 20 years old in the lake. So I'll talk about it a little bit when I show some of the length distributions. There's a big group of fish that kind of mix. We can tell sizes and ages on smaller fish, but once they get a certain size, they kind of overlap and mush together. And our gill netting survey, so we're doing a summer gill netting out there. The red bars following that same trend of those wild fish. Again, continuing to see those numbers go up each year as we go through there. The total number of the bar is the catch of all the fish. So if we look at this across the top, the numbers, we can see that, overall, kind of the relative abundance, our catch rate of lake trout, is pretty stable. It's probably going down a little bit as we see, but we're expecting those wild fish are going to keep kicking into the system and possibly monitor that, push that number back up a little bit. But definitely something we're watching in terms of total lake trout numbers. And another part that we're interested in here is size distribution. So when I talk about that fact that we're asking whether these wild fish are now to the length where they're reproducing, again, continuing with the red bars in through here as being our wild fish, this is length. I put in the, some markers here. Unfortunately, sorry, I did everything in millimeters, but 30 inches bigger, 25, 20. And you can kind of see through there that we have wild fish, unclipped fish, all the way up to 800 millimeters into the low 30-inch range. And we can see that they're making up bigger proportions of those fish as we go through. So as in those different size classes. And this is kind of what I talked about before. This is like an age structure. There's an age, and then this becomes a mess. They mix together. So this could be 10-year classes of fish. They just kind of lump together. Now, the other part that we've been doing too is looking at trends over time. So this is the same gill net data. I'm just presenting the blue bars representing 2025 and the gray bars representing 2020 when we first did that. And this is the same length distribution. I drew those same lines on there for 20, 25, and 30. But what I want to bring out is that we're seeing, while we still see fish all the way 850, 32, 33, 34 inches. You can kind of see in 2020, we had a little higher percentage of bigger fish. Our peak is kind of shifted a little bit from mid 20s, 26, 27 inches to where it was probably 29 in 2020. So again, something we're watching, but this is something we're keeping an eye on. The system is evolving with these wild fish coming in. We may have a little new adjustment of where they are, where the populations end up being. So one of the other assessments we're doing is part of that is looking at the condition of the fish. And I know you guys have seen them when you're out there fishing. We see kind of a good looking fish, fairly robust, but we're also seeing some skinny fish in there. And one of these measures, as we call it, is relative weight. It's basically like you take a value of all the lake trout populations in North America and you run your value compared to that historical broad scale value, and you end up with a relative weight. So if your measured relative weight we calculate is less than 80%, that would be a skinny fish. That would be this fish. So if we look at that trend over time of our gill netting data, we kind of see that it slowly went up to a peak in 2024. We had fairly high numbers of our fish were coming in skinny. And then in 2025, it dropped back down. They got better. And again, that peak and those values are one of those things that we started to bring in that discussion of forage fish again. So just, as we're getting this information in, we're having those bigger discussions. We're having that focus of where do we need to go to get us prepared for looking at the system and understanding what's going on there. Now, I mentioned our fall assessment, which we do. So I presented the same kind of layout on our length frequency. Our fall assessment shows it a little differently, but we still see those differences. 2020 being in gray, 2025 being in blue, where our peak and our size is in that 26, 27, 28, where in the past we were a little higher, like 29, 28 in there. But we're still seeing fish all the way out in both year classes. And kind of bringing back to some of those indicators that I talked about earlier, this is condition factor. It's kind of a plumpness measure. A value of 1 would be really plump, fat fish. So we established these two targets. Basically, we want to be within this range of these values. We want to be in there. So basically, this is actually looking at a bunch of the data and our indicators over time. We can see that, okay, look, in 2020, similar to what we saw in our gill netting, we saw numbers condition kind of declining, and it dropped down in 2024 and then went back up. So while we saw that drop or those change in that values in our gill netting, it really was still within what is the normal noise around size. There's some differences in there, but the 2024 was an interesting one where it dropped in there, went below that value. And again, that kind of drove some of those decisions to help with ending our stocking, looking at more forage fish work and trying to develop that. That's just kind of a clipping of our scorecard. Again, kind of 2025 showing, well, our only value right now that's not within our target is the median weight of the top 10 lake trout weight into the LCI Derby. So that one's still a little lower. So kind of wrapping up some of the highlights of our survey. From our spring juvenile bottom trawl, we're seeing a trend where that catch per unit effort of those juvenile fish keeps going up. We're getting a nice trend improvement in there. They're starting to appear in our summer gill netting. We're continuing to have those numbers go up as well for our wild. We are seeing just a little drop in the stock numbers, which is what we expect as we made those reductions. Those reductions are now coming into our survey. We saw some slight changes in our length frequency. Still seeing bigger fish, but there's a little bit going on in that big size group, but there may not be as many big fish. We saw that relative weight graph that I said in there with a 2024 being a really low value, skinny fish. But we did see a pretty dramatic improvement in 2025. And then our spawning trap net electrofishing survey, similar length distributions, a little shift there in the middle as we saw, but we saw those declining condition factors, but again, those early declines from 2020 to about 2023 were really in the normal noise associated with that data. But we did see the 2024 being the lowest we've measured since 2011, sorry. But we did see returning values in 2025.
Okay, as Margaret said, I'm Steve Smith. I'm the Sea Lamprey Program Manager. I'm happy to be here to share a short update on the control program this morning. So, though the service has been the lead agency for lamprey control since 2011, this certainly is a cooperative project, right? We get staff assistance from both the states of New York and Vermont when we're conducting lampricide applications, and we have major financial support from the Great Lakes Fishery Commission. Bernie mentioned the strategic plan. The new strategic plan for the next 5 years states the goal for the lamprey program to suppress sea lamprey populations to a level that supports a robust fishery, allows for restoration of salmonids, lake sturgeon, and other members of the cold water fish community. So what we're talking about here generally is lake trout and landlocked Atlantic salmon, but also including the lake sturgeon and other members of that cold water community such as burbot and whitefish. They're seeing benefits of lamprey control as well. So this slide, the map of the lake, this kind of shows the scope of the program. We have the lake divided into 3 zones where we focus control on a 3-year cycle. We're using barriers of some sort to reduce spawning activity in all or part of 9 tributaries around the lake. It's hard to see with the presentation, but there's some green tributaries around, and that's where barriers are the mode of control. We plan to trap adults on another 2 or 3 streams every year to help with our abundance estimates. And then we're controlling the other 18 of the remaining tribs where lamprey are located with lampricide. And we're monitoring an additional, 3 to 4 streams where there are small populations currently. Let's see. So I'm going to show you some photos sort of quickly of our trapping and barrier sites, just so everyone can see kind of the diversity of the equipment that we're operating and maintaining during the spawning season. That's from, about mid-April until the first part of June. This part of the program does require a substantial amount of effort and staff time. It doesn't always get as much attention as some of the lampricide work that people are familiar with. So I just thought it'd be good to show some of this to the group. This is on Mallett's Creek. It's just here in Colchester. We've got a sort of a new experimental barrier in the water here with a couple traps that we're catching adults and removing them there. Of course, we've got our removable barrier and trap on Morpion Stream. This is up in Quebec, a tributary to the Pike River. We also deploy small modular trapping setups in some of the small tributaries. This is in Mullenbrook over in New York. What else we have? We've made some improvements and hardened trap sites where we can put in seasonal removable barriers and traps in some small tributaries. This is Sunderland Brook in Vermont, Pond Brook. This is a tributary to Mallett's Creek, just here in Colchester. We have another one of these barriers on Beaver Brook over in New York as well. We also operate a small barrier to adults in Trout Brook. This is in Milton. There's only a small amount of spawning habitat in Trout Brook, and we've been able to block adults with that. We also have an adult trap on the barrier on the Great Chazy River. This is over in New York. And just the last couple of years, we've been trapping adults at Winooski 1 with a custom-built trap that we slide in right on the downstream side of the dam. And this work is mostly, again, for our estimating adult abundance, not necessarily population control. So what did we do since I gave a presentation last year? In 2025, we did do a lampricide application on the Boquet River over in New York. We had initially planned to have no applications in 2025, but we moved to treat this a year early because we identified some lamprey upstream of Willsboro for the first time that were set to transform and migrate out to the lake. We had hoped to do this in the spring of 25, but conditions didn't allow. Had a dry summer. We got pushed back, but we did finally have the conditions and did this treatment on November 4th last fall. We applied.
Was it effective?
We think so, yeah. So just a couple pictures of the application here. We're upstream of Willsboro. This is about River Mile 8.5, County Route 12 or Jersey Street in Essex. This is the metering of lampricide into the stream. Bottom left shows the apparatus that's used to spread and thoroughly mix the lampricide across the stream. And on the right here, you can see this is a transformed larvae that was found after the treatment up in that section of the stream above Willsboro. The data that we collected during the treatment, the water chemistry concentrations, says that it was an effective treatment. We carried our minimum lethals throughout. We'll be back in this stream in 2026 to do a thorough post-treatment larval assessment, so we'll know for sure if we cleaned it out. Moving forward in 2026, this fall, our treatment zone is northern New York. So we'll be assessing four delta areas for presence and distribution of larvae this summer in preparation for potential balicide applications in the fall. Historically, we've treated about 200 acres of lentic delta area in this region. We additionally plan to treat the Great Chazy, the Little Chazy, Saranc salmon, Little Ausable, and Big Ausable rivers with TFM. So this work will all occur in late September and through October if the weather cooperates. The results, Bernie mentioned this. This is our wounding assessment results from 2025. So in 2025, we recorded the lowest wounding rate on lake trout that we've seen in program history. So the rate on salmon was also under our target. This is the 5th year in a row that we've met the target on landlocked salmon. So most of this has taken some time to get to where we are, but we feel like we made steady improvements to the program through the years, and I think finally realizing some of those benefits. In addition to the wounding, I mentioned adult assessment a couple times. This graph shows our pooled adult spawning run assessment numbers every year since 2022 when we started with this method. So these estimates are generated using mark and recapture techniques on the spawning run and basically just pooling those estimates across the years. So in 2022, our estimate for these 5 tribs was almost 3,000 adult spawners. In this last year, 2025, that was down to just over 500. So a marked reduction in adult abundance in addition to seeing that reduction in the wounding rate. That's all I have to present, but I'm happy to take questions. We probably have a few more minutes for questions here if anybody has them. Yes.
What's the favorite prey of the lamprey?
Is there a favorite prey?
Yeah.
Well, I don't.
Size? Is it a species?
I mean, they're like other fish. They want to be at a certain temperature most of the time where they're comfortable. So, generally speaking, when they overlap in temperature preference with hosts, that's when they're most likely they're going to attach to anything they see. Right? They may not stay on rough-scaled fish very long because they have a hard time getting food. So if they attach to a salmon and a perch at the same time, they may not stay on a perch. They may stay on the salmon longer because it's easier. So that's probably why you notice maybe more overlap, more sea lamprey on salmon early in the year when the water's cold throughout the system. Later in the summer, maybe the salmon are not in the same place. They're more apt to run into lake trout. So there may be some switching there, but we don't really have any information that says, you know, they like burbot better than salmon or lake trout. It's when they run into a host, they're gonna eat. They're primitive. It's that simple, I think.
That's an astronomical reduction. What do you think is the biggest factor that went into that reduction?
Comprehensive control. So we know that if lamprey are out there, we need to control the population. So for a long time, we were controlling most of the lamprey. I mean, there's remains a few places where we're not able to apply lampricide or a fully effective barrier. But for the most part, we've addressed all of the sources of lamprey, and I think that's what has finally sort of tipped the scales a little bit. Yep, go
How
ahead.
far upstream in the North Branch have the lamprey been found?
So we actually have not collected a larvae in the North Branch. We have seen adults, we have seen spawning, we've not seen larvae. We treated about 1.5 miles up, just to make sure, because that's where the area where we saw nests in 2022 and 2023. But we looked all the way to Reber, and we didn't find larvae there anywhere. In the main stem, the larvae stop right at that 8.5 mile mark, basically that Jersey Street or County Route 12. I'm not sure what the locals call it, but and then after that point, we didn't find larvae above there. So we think that that's sort of the end, at least right now. Yeah, go ahead.
Is mallet still the biggest producer in the lake, and how effective is the current style of barrier you're using?
Mallett's Creek. So we actually just did an assessment on Mallett's Creek in late last summer, and the larval estimate in Mallett's Creek has dropped down to like less than 500. So it's nowhere near the biggest producer.
It used to be, didn't it?
There was a time when we were catching a lot of adults there, but the larval numbers, it's not very big. So even if the density was sort of high, the total number of larvae that's in there, you know, just can't support as many as a very low density in, you know, the Ausable River or one of those other examples. So we are monitoring what that trapping operation is doing to the larval population. That's really what counts. If we can keep that number down, we're not sending a lot of transformers out.
Off with the Fish and Wildlife Service, and then Graham Montague will follow up. He's a PhD student at UVM. I'm going to go sit here at about 7.5 minutes to keep you guys on.
I'm gonna go for 12, and he's got a little more. I got more,
Okay.
so it'll be mostly. Hey everyone. Yeah, so I'll talk a little bit about salmon, and just to get started, landlocked salmon were historically abundant in Lake Champlain. These are the same species as sea-run Atlantic salmon, except they have a life history where they complete their entire life cycle in freshwater. So replace the ocean with Lake Champlain. So they grow up in a river, but then move to Lake Champlain to attain adult size. So they were historically present in at least 10 tributaries to Lake Champlain, but unfortunately were extirpated by the 1830s. So extirpated means kind of locally went extinct. And this is because primarily dams were built that blocked access to spawning habitat, along with a variety of other things. So currently management goals. So the Cooperative has been working on salmon restoration since the 1970s. We have two primary goals. The first is to support a recreational fishery. This fishery includes fishing in the lake, trolling, and then also salmon return to tributaries to spawn in the fall and create opportunity for catching these fish as they come back to rivers. Primary things that are being done to support this fishery include stocking. Currently, the stocking target for Atlantic salmon is 304,000 yearling equivalents. And then like Steve just talked about, sea lamprey control are among the kind of the two big things that are done to support the fishery. The second kind of big picture goal is to restore natural reproduction and the contribution of wild salmon to the Lake Champlain population. This is, I'd say, a little bit of a harder goal to attain because of the complex life history of salmon. But we're working towards this by monitoring reproductive success of salmon, improving fish passage, improving habitat, and conducting applied research to try and understand bottlenecks to restoration success. So life history of salmon in Lake Champlain, nice drawing here, but I think it's useful just to review what these fish are doing out there. So female salmon lay between 2,000 and 4,000 eggs in the gravel in spawning tributaries. Their offspring will spend anywhere from 1.5 to 4 years in that tributary before something clicks in their little fish brains and they decide it's time to migrate out to Lake Champlain. So they very rapidly in the spring at about 6 inches migrate straight downstream to Lake Champlain, where they'll grow for anywhere from 6 months to 3 years before returning to their tributary to breed. And so this peak spawning or breeding occurs in mid-November, and fish are either going to come back to the area that they were born or stocked, and that's called homing, or stray to a new location. And so just to kind of highlight how rapidly fish grow within Lake Champlain, this is a length at age plot. The bottom box plots show length at age for fish growing in a tributary or in the river environment. But then once they enter Lake Champlain, you can see they rapidly put on a lot of weight. And that's because they're switching from eating macroinvertebrates, little bugs, to eating alewife and rainbow smelt. And so a fish that's about 15 inches in Lake Champlain is likely 2. 21 inches is a 3-year-old, and bigger than that, 4 years old, are around 24, 25 inches. But I think it's really interesting to see the dramatic increase in growth for fish once they enter Lake Champlain. So I'm going to talk about current stocking levels. So salmon are stocked by 2 hatcheries, Ed Weed Fish Culture Station. They have a target of 155,500 yearling smolts. And these fish will have fin clips present for the most part. So they'll either have an adipose right ventral or left ventral clip. And that allows managers to differentially mark fish according to stocking location and know the age of fish. But I will highlight that there's a new study going on with these fish that will allow managers to understand differences in survival between salmon stocked in the main lake versus the inland sea in Mallett's Bay. So this chart shows what clips fish will receive based on where they're going to be stocked. So for example, in 2026, main lake stocked fish get a left ventral and adipose fin, compared to fish stocked in inland sea or Mallett's Bay will have an adipose fin. And that allows us to, for recaptured fish, figure out where they're from, but also look at interbasin movements as well. The other hatchery contributing to salmon stocking is Eisenhower. They stock 138,000 smolts and 210,000 unfed fry. These fish have no fin clips, so no LV, no AD, but they still are marked using a genetic tagging approach called parentage-based tagging that allows us to mark them according to their stocking location. I have one slide on that later, but don't have time to get too far into the weeds on that one. So how are things in 2025? So one way we can look at this is looking at long-term data on the Winooski River. This shows the number of salmon returning to the Winooski River fish lift. And while the long-term average is 71, there were 80 returns in 2025. So while it is above the long-term average by a little bit, it's still a little disappointing compared to the last couple of years where we've had record returns to the Winooski River with 2024 being the all-time record for most returning salmon. And I think one of the reasons this may have been lower in 2025 is because of the very low lake levels during the fall, as well as low river flow during the spawning period. That maybe it might not necessarily mean there were not as many fish, but maybe not as many returning to the Winooski, and the capture efficiency at those low flow levels is maybe reduced at the fish lift where these are caught at. There's also relatively low returns to Hatchery Brook in 2025. Again, very likely owing to the low lake levels that we had in the fall of 2025. And so like Bernie talked about, we have some salmon status indicators, and I'll just highlight a couple of those from the 2025 season. But briefly, all of them looked good. So they were within target ranges for all the salmon indicators. And I'll just look at a couple of these. So this is that fish condition index that Bernie presented on for lake trout. And so the green and purple bars are the range we like to be in. For 2025, we were well within the target range for salmon condition. This is length of age 0, lake age 0 salmon. So these are stocked smolts, and this is how big they are by the fall. And again, we're within the target ranges for this. This is lake age 1 fish length. So these are last year's smolts that have spent 1 winter in Lake Champlain. So we know their age, and this is the average size of those fish from a variety of different sampling surveys. But again, well within the target range. The only indicator that was a little on the low side was the LCI top 10 biggest fish. You can see there's a lot more variability in this indicator where for the 3 years prior to 2025, it was below target. We did get it within the target for 2025, but it's still kind of towards the tail end of that. And just to put some numbers to that, instead of kilograms, 2025 value was 6.41. So that's the median weight of the top 10 fish weighed in at the LCI. And so while that may represent, it either represents there's not a lot of big fish out there, or it either represents that they're out there, but they just weren't caught and weighed in at the LCI. I will note that in 2025, during agency sampling, we did catch some really, really big fish. This year we caught, I think it was 12 fish over 9 pounds were sampled during agency sampling. So there are still some big fish out there. And again, I want to highlight the excellent work done by the Lamprey program to bring lamprey wounding rates down really low for the last couple years. This is really, really great trend and really good news for salmon and lake trout and other potential hosts of lamprey. Last thing I want to highlight is some work that we're doing with volunteer anglers. So since 2021, we've been recruiting anglers to collect fin clips for us from fish that they've been catching. And they can provide the small tissue sample to us that we can use to understand the stocking location of that salmon. So this is done using parentage-based tagging, which is a way to use genetics to mark fish. And so the way it works is an angler catches a salmon and provides a tissue sample to Fish and Wildlife Service. We do DNA extraction and genotyping, and then do a sort of DNA paternity testing where we match that individual fish to brood stock from the hatchery. And if we detect a match, then for that fish, we get a whole bunch of really useful information. So the sex of that fish, the fish's actual birthday, the age at capture, the stocking date, the stocking river, and the location within the river it was stocked. So having that detailed suite of information from recaptured salmon is a really powerful type of data, so we can look at the effectiveness of different stocking approaches. So just to highlight a couple results from this program, we've had 88 people participate, contributing over 1,000 samples so far. And really, I want to highlight that with this data, we can look at how different stocking approaches are represented in what anglers are catching. And then we could kind of learn from what's working well. And I'll just highlight one result from that. So this plot shows the fish caught and submitted by anglers from Lake Champlain over 2 years, and it shows what river they were stocked in. So we went through the genetic matching approach and assigned a stocking river of origin. And so this is really notable because we stock the Boquet, Saranc, and Winooski with roughly equal numbers of fish. But you can see they're not equally represented in the catch of anglers. The Saranc River stocked fish represented 71% and 68% of the samples that were submitted by anglers. So they're disproportionately represented in what's out there being caught in the lake relative to their stocking numbers. So this is just one example of the type of things that we're learning, and this gives us information to kind of further investigate, well, what's going on in the Saranc, so we can kind of make better decisions with our stocking programs moving forward. And with that, I'll leave my information up there in case anyone wants to contact me about participating.
All right, perfect. Well, thank you all for being here. I really appreciate everyone taking the time on a Saturday to come out and listen to some science and cool management that we're doing. Yeah, it's just I feel really grateful just to be here with all you all, but also some amazing managers and agencies that do their best to try to manage the Lake Champlain the best we can. But yeah, I'll be talking about and kind of highlighting 2 projects that we're doing at UVM for my research that really highlights just the collaboration that we have with anglers. And really, without you all, we wouldn't be able to get the data that we have. So really just kind of highlighting these 2 different projects. One, the Lake Age Zero movement. We collected, you anglers collected all so we could tag some fish. And also the diet, looking at the diet composition between the main lake and inland sea. So to start with the first project, the movement of age zeros, just really a basic representation of what happens with acoustic telemetry and how we're actually using to track the movements of these fish is that each fish gets a unique tag. We surgically implant that tag in that salmon, and then that tag sends a signal through the water. So these, there's signals going through the water of each of these tags, and then we have receivers positioned lake-wide. In this map, each black dot represents a receiver, and if a fish swims by that receiver, it downloads that data. We're able to, get that data each year, and then we're able to track the movements and see where these fish are moving. And then each triangle is where we've actually released tagged salmon. So the triangles represent the tagged salmon, the black dots represent each of the receivers, and we have really great spatial representation. So theoretically, if a fish is tagged and swimming in Lake Champlain, we should be able to track it, which is extremely fun. So I'll let this video run while I'm talking, but this is actually how we tag the salmon. So this is on Converse Bay boat ramp with Ron and Rick. And this was the last salmon that we tagged in 2025, which is cool. But this fish is anesthetized. We're surgically implanting the tag on this fish. But yeah, I really want to highlight that anglers kind of came to the rescue for collecting some of these fish. In 2024, we were able to tag 30 total fish with V13 acoustic transmitters, and they have a battery life of around 3 years. So we were able to track these fish for 3 years. We tagged fish in Whalen and Willsboro Bay with traditional fishery sampling gear, so electrofishing. But in Sandbar, unfortunately, in the inland sea, our gears didn't do a great job. So really, we reached out to anglers. Specifically, Ron helped out a ton. Lake Champlain United, a lot of people came, and in one day, we were able to tag 15 fish in the inland sea, which is such a cool success story. It kind of saved our season and allowed us to actually put tags in fish rather than just keeping them on the shelf. And then in 2025, we found that it was so efficient to work with anglers, and you all are so wonderful to work with, that we tagged all of the 43 fish from angler caught fish. So in the main lake, we tagged them at Point Bay Marina and Converse Bay. And then we also tagged again in the inland sea, 21 fish. So in 2025, all the fish that we tagged were angler caught fish, which is cool. So yeah, kind of wrapping up this surgery, we put sutures in them, closed that incision. This fish is still knocked out, but it takes a little bit of time for it to wake back up. And then we release it back into the water, happy and healthy, and it collects the data that we could actually track the movements of these fish. I'll keep moving. Oh, here, this is me releasing it back right off the boat ramp, but you can see it's swimming away, happy and healthy. So a way to visualize this data, we could use plots on maps, and really just kind of the most basic way to do it is where are these fish actually being detected, where there's receivers. So on the left-hand map, we have Lake Champlain, and then we have a bubble plot. So each of these red bubbles or dots is where fish that were tagged in the inland sea. We're only looking at inland sea tagged fish, the age zeros that we tagged in 2024, because that's the only data we have. But those red dots kind of show where these fish were actually detected. And the larger the red dot is, the more number of detections. And another way that we could visualize this is with animations. And these are a fun way just to see the real-time data of throughout the year where these fish are moving. And you can see the majority of them that we tagged in the inland sea are staying within that basin, but there are some fish throughout time that stray out into the main lake. So we do have a couple individuals that want to go out. Again, this is only a snapshot of the data that we can collect. This is only the first couple months of this data. We still have a couple years of data we can get from these fish, which is cool. And that's what I want to highlight here. So this is just pretty much the raw data represented in an abacus plot. So on the x-axis, you have time. So that's throughout time. And then on the y-axis, you have receiver. And that's oriented in latitude. So furthest north is the top receiver, and then the furthest south receiver is on the bottom. And that's the raw data from the Lake H0 fish that we tagged in the inland sea. But in the red rectangle, you can see that's all blank, and that means that we have that much more data to collect on these fish. So there's fish still swimming around, actively swimming right now that we're picking up on receivers, which is super cool too. So that's the movement side of things. And then the second project that we that you all help out with is the diet collection. So we're comparing the seasonal and spatial diets of Atlantic salmon in the main lake and the inland sea. And the whole framework, the way that we collect the data this way is you all go out, catch fish, do a great job doing it. You call me, I meet you at a boat ramp, or I'm already at a boat ramp, and we go from the process that way. So Melissa and Rick, you can see in these cool pictures, they got great salmon. They called me, I meet you at the boat ramp. We collected data. Last year in 2025, we collected 190 harvested fish. And then the data that we collect from this fish is one, the stomach contents. So we cut open the fish, take the stomach contents, see what it was eating, a snapshot like during that day. This fish was eating a bunch of alewife. And we are analyzing this data currently at the University of Vermont. Then we also take a genetic fin clip. So each fish gets a genetic fin clip. This gets sent off to Kurt, like he was saying with this PVT genetic study. And then we could identify a bunch of different cool biological factors with that. And then finally, we also take a fatty acid sample. So fish gets cut open from their belly. It stores a lot of that fat, a lot of the lipids. And if a fish wasn't eating that day, so we open up the stomach and it's empty, we're able with the fatty acid sample to look back multiple months prior to say, okay, this fish was eating primarily alewife, primarily smelt, or whatever other forage fish they're actually eating. And that gets sent off to SUNY Brockport. They do the analysis there, and we currently sent off a big push of samples there too. So again, this is really just highlighting the whole process of angler to me to agency work, the whole collaboration, the whole cooperative working together, which is super cool. So last slide, I just want to thank everybody again just for being here, listening to us talk, but also thank you so much for all the samples and all the collaboration that you all do. I've made some great friends. And I think we're doing some great research to hopefully help the salmon fishery in the future. So thank you so much. And I will say one last thing. In 2026, we are repeating our diet study. So I'll be on the forums. People have already been out fishing, but we're collecting more samples. So if you harvest some fish, just give me a buzz. So thank you all.
Awesome work, guys.
Yeah, ready.
All right, so my name is Nicole Balk. I'm with the New York State DEC. I'm the Lake Champlain fish biologist. And I'm going to give you an update on our Saranc River net pen project. We've been doing it. We did it for 5 years, like we said we would. We had the pens in the water, stocked the fish, released them. Rob, can't hear me? All right. All right. All right, so we did the Saranc River net pen project for 5 years. The pens, the fish getting stocked into the pens, comparing it to direct stocking. We're not done yet, however. We still need to collect the adult fish. We stock them as smolts, and when they come back as adults, we still need to collect them for 3 more years, 3 more falls. So we will be asking for your continued assistance if you're fishing on the Saranc River. So this is, again, a partnership. We have New York DEC, we have U.S. Fish and Wildlife. The Plattsburgh Boat Basin and Marina was critical. They provided the location and docks. The Lake Champlain chapter of Trout Unlimited. They volunteered, they helped us install and remove the nets. They came out and fed the fish every day. It was wonderful. And we had many volunteers from SUNY Plattsburgh, and even the local community came out for stocking day and to help with installation and removal. So this is sort of an image, aerial image of where we did the pens at the Plattsburgh Boat Basin and Marina. The first location we did for a few years, had some issues getting the docks in early enough to stock the salmon, so we shifted down a little bit to the new Oasis Marina, and they were very helpful. They even had a crane operator, and we didn't have to struggle so hard with the manual labor, so that was wonderful. It's also a little bit more protected in their marina, so we had 6 pens in there per usual, 2 feeders per pen, keeping the fish healthy and happy. And I don't know if anyone's seen this, but we have a couple of video clips. So on stocking day, this is what the fish look like in the pens. They're swimming around, they're active. This is what it looks like down there. So I thought it was pretty cool. And then, let's see if we can go to the next one. And then on release day, what we did is we cut the top of the net down so that it would sink to the bottom. And we've got a video clip here. SUNY Plattsburgh came out and did the first video, and then our technician had a GoPro. We just stuck that in there, and you can see the fish have no problem leaving. So they go on out to the lake and start their journey. All right, so the goal of net pens is to increase the returns of Atlantic salmon to the river where we stock them, right? So we put them in the Saranc River or as close as we could, and we want them to recognize that river water and come back. It originally started over in Lake Ontario. We stole their idea because it worked really well over there. They've done it for more than 10 years, and they saw an improvement in returns from their pen-stocked fish. They got 2 times better returns than the normal direct stocking. So we thought, why not try it on Lake Champlain, right? So it's a different species, so there's no guarantees. It's a fully experimental project. So we compared the net pens and direct stocking, and we want to see which ones do better, which ones come back in higher numbers in 2 to 3 years. Is it worth it? Does it make a difference? That's to be determined, as I said. So in 2021, some of the fish were marked with fin clips. Very shortly after, we started the genetic marking program, which Kurt mentioned. So there's no physical marks on the fish. You can't tell just by looking at it if it's one that we stocked. So that's why we ask anglers to send us a little piece of the fin clip. So we send it to the lab, and eventually we find out where that fish was stocked and the whole list of biological information about it. And it'll tell us whether it came from the pen stocking or the direct stocking and which river. So again, net pens, fully experimental, 26,000 smolts per group. And the net pens, we put them in a little early. We hold them for 3 weeks and release them at the normal release time in early May. And the direct stocking happens the same day, early May. So growth has never been a goal, but it is a good sign of good health in the fish. So you can see some of the lengths. I won't talk too deeply about it, but the point is the average length of fish when we stock them in the pens is very comparable to the size of the fish that are getting stocked directly that have been in the hatchery for that same period. So they're doing well. We measure 100 smolts every year before stocking, and then just prior, or when we put them into the pens, and then just prior to releasing from the pens. And we take a look at their silvering stage to see if they've done this smoltification process, if they're ready for the lake. So in 2025, 86% of them reached that final silvering stage, so they're ready to go. And that was similar for all years of the project. It was 80 to 89% every year, so they're looking good. And Kurt gave me these lovely figures. So we have some of the fish that we've stocked being captured out in the lake. So in 2024, the fish that we stocked in 2024, they caught some in the lake already that same year. If you look, you can't really probably see the scale on the left side. It's very small, but the highest number is 12 and a half fish. So it's not a ton of fish we're talking about in this first one. But it shows the pink is the pen stocked fish, the blue is the direct stocked or river stocked fish. Kind of suggests maybe the pen fish are doing a little better, right? And I wanted to note that in 2025 we also added we added a stress test. We had some Canadian researchers come down and take blood samples, and they're going to look at cortisol and a couple other things and determine if chemically the fish, if we can tell if stocking in the pen reduces their stress compared to direct stocking, and maybe gives them, a better chance at survival. So that's early days. They're still running the samples as of last month, and we'll share those results as soon as we have them. All right, so in 2023, we had some lake and river recaptures. They're the same graph, so pink is the pen, blue is the river. it shows there could be a pen advantage. Again, this is more fish. On the lake, they got about 50 fish, and in the river, it was 150 fish. Seems good. If we go back to 2022, well, now it looks like maybe the direct stock fish had an advantage that year. And then 2021, they're pretty similar for the lake recaptures, but over here in the river, again, more of the river fish were found, direct stock fish. So we got 2 years of potential different directions. So nothing conclusive yet. Again, small numbers, and we have 3 more years of data that we want to collect on these adults that are returning to the rivers. And hopefully we can learn from that and then improve our stocking wherever possible. Okay. So here's some of our helpful volunteers with the buckets. Overall, I'd say the project was a success. We raised the fish. They were healthy. Only 1.7% mortality. That was the average each year out of 26,000 fish. So I think that's pretty good. It cost $14,600 to make these 6 pens. We had great collaboration and outreach, as I said, every year, and people kept coming back year after year, and it was really nice to get to work and interact with the anglers and get you guys involved. So like I said, early results are unclear, but we still have to collect some data and figure out if there's an advantage to the pen stocking. So list of several people that helped, probably not everybody. Special thanks to Don Lee for coordinating the fish feeding at the pens. He was there every single day of those 3 weeks, taking care of them, and he let us know if there was any issues with the pens, we could run up there and fix it and get it taken care of right away. So I appreciate that. This is my contact information. I also have business cards in the back if you want to take a card, and there's a few others from our agency. I also have a quick summary printed out of the net pen project with some figures. If you're interested, there's a few copies. I wanted to save the trees, but if you want to email me, I'm happy to send that out to anybody. If you're interested in any of the creel data that we did over the last 4 years, I also can, email you copies of that. Does anybody have questions?
Thanks, Cole.
Yeah.
One question.
You assume all these fish that are stocked are seral?
No, we hope not. No, we're stocking the fish. We hope that eventually, in some of the rivers at least, we're hoping for some natural reproduction eventually. Yeah.
Is there a plan to continue this process if it works?
Too early to say. Like I said, we've got 3 more years of just collecting the data to finish up this study and look at it, learn, evaluate, and then we can go from there. I think it's too early right now. We are planning a project down in Lake George using the pens. It's a little different study, but they're trying to improve salmon survival down there as well.
All right, thanks everybody. For the last couple of years, we've been trying to add an agenda item to this day of presentations that are coming from the angler perspective of fishing Lake Champlain. And this year, we decided that we would invite a few anglers that are pretty adept and comfortable using forward-facing sonar or live sonar technology that's becoming very, very popular to come and just give us sort of some insights on how that has affected or changed their fishing. Has it increased their enjoyment? Has it changed their catch rates? Anything interesting about this technology and the advancements we're seeing right now in terms of what it's doing to, fishing participation, fishing enjoyment, fishing success. So we have 3 anglers here today. The first one that you'll hear from is Dylan Smith. As you heard earlier, he works for our department. But he's a really avid angler that has this technology. All 3 of them do. And each one of them kind of uses it, in a different way for different species. And, it's just going to be interesting to hear their individual perspectives. So Dylan will go first. We have Dan Bushey, who used to live in Virgins, now lives in Milton. I have his address up here wrong. Sorry, Dan. And he'll talk about his experiences using forward-facing sonar, I think, from, different areas of the lake that Dylan might talk about. And then we have Zach McNaughton, who has a YouTube channel called Vermont Master Anglers. That's right? Vermont Master Anglers. Publishes a lot of really interesting stuff on YouTube about fishing in Vermont, but has really, really kind of gone off the deep end, I think, in terms of forward-facing sonar.
lately. He's really, really into it, and I think it's going to be a really interesting sort of perspective from all three of them. So just kind of introducing, some of the background of forward-facing sonar or live sonar technology. It's really sort of created two polar opposite views in the fishing community. There's some that really support it and think it's great. Kind of this, if you ain't scoping, you're hoping kind of thing. It's really changed, anglers' ability who learn how to use it to go out and find fish. Then you have, the other side of the coin where people are, well, that's not really fishing. I don't want to stare at a screen all the time. I want to go out and relax and enjoy the nature and the surroundings around me while I'm fishing. So it's just this, there's been a pretty big, argument online that's developed over the last 6-7 years as this technology has become more popular. Price point, is starting to come down, so more people are able to purchase it and start playing with it. But, there is, this dichotomy a little bit between the users. So, I thought it would be really interesting to hear, from people that are actively using it, to hear what their experiences are. From a biologist perspective, fisheries managers, we're starting to pay attention too. Nationally, this has been elevated in conferences and conversations between states about what do we do with this technology, if it starts heading in a certain direction. And those directions could be, is it making people catch more fish? Is it making them fish more? That's good. Is it increasing harvest rates? Do we want that? Are we okay with that? Is it something we need to consider and start making adjustments? There was even, calls outright to ban the technology when it first started becoming popular. That's kind of faded because you can't just continually chase technology through regulation. So managers need to decide if there's a need or a reason to change the way we might regulate fishing for certain species that might be more prone to this type of technology. This is just sort of a suite of some of the published scientific literature that is now starting to be put out there looking at these questions. Just last month, the American Fisheries Society held an open table discussion and presentation on this technology that invited researchers that are now studying this to talk about what they're seeing out there, talk about what their studies are showing. They had some state biologists from a few states, mostly out in the Midwest and the Southwest, looking at how this has affected, fishing rates and catch rates for things like crappie and catfish and all sorts of stuff. So that was, that's really, I thought it was really good. It's about an hour long. The links to that are at the bottom of this. You can get it later from the YouTube when we put this up on our YouTube channel. But if you're interested in where research is going on forward-facing technology and how it's affecting fish and fishing, those links will be a really good source of that. So from my perspective, what I've been seeing here out on Lake Champlain, just as one small example is, we've got species that are native to Lake Champlain but have mostly been overlooked or considered accidental catches, bycatch when you're trolling for trout and salmon, that were interesting but not really, thought much of. That is, potentially changing with forward-facing sonar. And people in this room that are going to talk, Dylan, Dan, and Zach, they're in these pictures for one thing. They're starting now to preferentially target some of these species that are more or less been ignored over time. Burbot and whitefish are two big ones. Difficult species to catch and find sometime, but that's changing. And they were really successful this winter in particular. I think these are all pretty recent this winter photos here, where these are species that have no regulations, no catch limits, no seasons, no length limits, but they're starting to get increased attention and focus because they're good to eat, they're fun to catch, and now we have the technology to find them. So does that change anything for us as fisheries managers on the lake? This is a quote from that American Fisheries Society presentation or open table that I really thought was interesting from one of the presenters, Steve Cook, that said, live sonar has eliminated the insurance policy that we as fisheries managers used to depend on. And what that means is there used to be a whole segment of these populations of fish that were undiscoverable, untouchable. And even things like smallmouth bass, you know, they spend a portion of their time offshore, suspended in deep water. And, you know, most of the people that are bass fishing are going to catch the fish that are in places you would associate with their, you know, habitat usage. So reefs and shoals and shorelines. But now they're being caught out in 50, 60 feet of water down 25 feet because you can see them, you can throw a lure to them, you can catch them. And Steve Cook, you know, has pointed out that those refuges of untouchable fish are going away. So, you know, what do we do about it? I just wanted to throw this video up. This is a video I filmed with Zach. I don't have this technology, so I have to beg to get on people's boats who do. But I went out with Zach to go and try to catch some crappie. That's a ball of crappie in 30 feet of water that's suspended. The ball of crappie is about 20 feet or 15 feet wide and about 20 feet deep. All we had to do is point the sonar at it, see where they were, throw my lure to it, let the lure come down, watch the fish come up to intersect my lure, and I set the hook and I reel in my fish. Now, if I'm somebody who's very harvest oriented, I can go out there and catch a limit pretty instantly. So we as managers, you know, don't expect everybody to catch a limit every time. But that may be changing with technology when you use it like this. So I'm going to pass it off to the anglers. Dylan's going to go first. Dylan Smith, as I said, works for our department in our access area program, but he's a big proponent of forward-facing sonar. I bet out with him fishing a couple of times with it, and it's pretty impressive what it can do.
Thanks, Shawn. So the fish can't hide, but they can still choose not to bite. So I just want to walk through this really quick so everyone can get oriented. This is what your fish finder will look like. The 0 mark here is where your transducer is. Looking out here horizontally, right now I'm at a range of 55 feet. That's how far out in front of you you're looking. You can scan out further. You lose detail, but you know, if the fish are really suspended, you might be able to pick them out. There's your depth, somewhere between 12 and 14, or you can read it there, 12.5. A couple things that are worth mentioning here. These are all fish, and there's a steep break right here. They were pushed up tight to it. Just a really convenient place to find fish because they didn't have anywhere to go. But one interesting thing here, and I think it's one of the biggest benefits of fishing with forward-facing sonar, is this band right here. That's from me cutting a hole with the auger. That's just the turbulence going down. And if you notice where the fish kind of aren't, it's right there. So one of the coolest things about fishing with this is you see how fish react to any kind of disturbance. It could be footsteps, it could be an auger, it could be a boat. But I think understanding how this works will help with the rest of this presentation that we're going to do. So to talk about forward-facing sonar, I think it's worth mentioning how we got there. In about 1959, that's when the first flasher style graph came out. It's just a circular representation of a vertical water column. It's great for identifying fish and jigs and weeds, bottom hardness. They're durable, they're affordable. You see these all the time. If you move forward to 2004, this is when side imaging came out. You're able to look left and right of your transducer. It's great at identifying, you know, all things structure. So you can see there's a big rock pile here. There might be some fish floating around. You can see transitions in bottom. So from like a hard bottom to a soft bottom. And then if you fast forward to 2012, 360 imaging came out. It's basically like side imaging, but it's a transducer that continually spins round and round to show you what's around too. And then what we're here to talk about today is forward-facing sonar. I will mention I did omit a couple other kinds of equipment that people use, but I thought that these were the highlights. So one other, how do you play that?
Just hit the space bar.
Okay. One other piece of technology that I think kind of ties it all together is underwater cameras. They're great at verifying what's actually down there for aquatic vegetation or fish species or seeing what's on the bottom. And I don't think that there's, you know, one piece of equipment that is way better than the next. I think forward-facing sonar is fantastic, but being able to see how the fish actually react to your jigs is helpful at certain times. So this is what I run in the winter. If you looked at my boat, it probably wouldn't look different than anybody else's. I have a graph and a transducer. My wintertime setup is slightly different. I run a hopper setup. So basically my graph is mounted to a bucket. And then I have all of the brains of the operation inside. I had a buddy making a plate, my data processor, my black box, my GLS10, whatever you want to call it, is mounted to it. I have a lithium battery, and then all my cords are wrapped up inside. The one thing I do is I run a pole that I'm able to, 1-minute operation, carry it, pull a hole, drop it down, scan for fish. If there's fish, I fish. If not, I pick it up, lock it into place, and I can move. It's great having the bucket set up because then I can put fish in there. If I'm keeping them, I can throw my rod in there. It just keeps me very mobile. So I pulled this as an example. This is not anywhere near Champlain, but it's something near and dear to my heart. It's a lake that I grew up on. I spent tons of time fishing here. I fished it with my dad and my uncle and my grandfather, and I thought I knew the lake well. Well, then I found out about lake maps. And, you know, I think as anglers, you pick out spots that are appealing, steep breaks, humps, flats, deep water basins. When I found that, I was like, oh, this lake doesn't look like I thought it did. So, you know, basically the first time I got side imaging, I was like, go out there, fish spots that you had never fished before. My mind was blown. Like, I found new rock humps. I found trees. I found fish in places that I never thought they would be. When I got forward-facing sonar, it was the same thing. I said, go out, fish new spots. So I did. And what I found is that the fish were everywhere. You know, they didn't necessarily relate to structure. They were on the surface. They were in the middle of the water column. They're on the bottom, just in no man's land. How I employ it today is I take that map, I identify the spots that I think are high priority to look at, and then I just kind of like, in my mind, you know, draw lines on the map and say, I'm just going to go walk this or drive in my boat. And if I'm in a boat, it's no problem. This is about a 4.5 mile loop. It's a lot to do on foot. But in a boat, no big deal. You just drive until you see fish you want to try to catch. Ice fishing, you know, you cut a hole, you walk 100 feet, 150 feet, cut another hole, and you just kind of let the fish guide you to where you want to go. So we're going to see if this video plays, but this is how I would approach things in the summertime. I run 2 graphs. I do a split screen on the bottom, one with my mapping, one with side imaging, and then live scope on the top. And what I do is I just drive around and I'm making maps because I find them, yeah, if you want to hear the video. I find maps being helpful when I go back. So I'm looking at side imaging to see what the bottom structure is. And then I also look at the live scope because I want to, you know, if I see fish, great. Like if I'm in search mode, I'm not typically stopping to fish for them. I'm going to eventually go back there and try it. So I might drop waypoints or I might like mentally, you know, remember the camp that was on shore right there. So now that you see what it looks like, you understand how I use it. The next big piece of the puzzle is learning how to identify fish, because with this forward-facing sonar, you see tons of fish. Big ones, small ones, everything in between. But learning if you want to go out and catch crappies, or if you want to go out and catch walleye, like learning what they look like on your graph is an important part. So this first video, as it plays, I'll point it out, but you can see right here between the 30 and 40 foot mark, there's 7 or 8 fish there. They're close bottom. They're not long. They're not what I would call overly tall, but those are perch. I did catch them, so I can verify that. But right above them, you'll see a fish. It's a little bit more suspended, and I was fishing for crappies. And if you can picture what a crappie looks like, you know, they have a sloped forehead, a fairly tall body, a pretty narrow tail section, and then their tail gets big. So it looks kind of just like that on the forward-facing sonar. And then you'll see a little pot of fish out in the back. The way they were stacked up, they were sunfish in my mind. And I did catch some, so I can verify that too. Oh. All right.
I think if you just...
Yeah, we're good. Yeah. So, perch, there's a crappie. It'll play, I think, continuously. And then there's the pot of sunfish in the back. The way they're stacked up, you know, it's a tighter group. They're stacked up further off the bottom. Sunfish, but you see that crappie. You can see the slope head. You can see the separate tail. In the bigger, I mean, crappies are super easy to identify just because of their shape. You know, if you're looking at like walleye, it's usually like a diamond head with a tapered body. If you're looking at drum or carp, typically they just kind of look like a blimp. But those are like the little details that you learn in time. And I think once you can identify fish, it's so much easier to go out and target one specific species. So this next video, I was fishing with a couple friends. We fished all day. We didn't find fish that we could catch. Nothing was biting. And we were about ready to throw in the towel. But we had one more little cove on the way back to the boat ramp. And we're like, let's just go look in there. We hadn't tried it yet. And so what you're going to see is this is the pot of crappies. When we initially found them, they were pushed up against the steep break. We started casting like 80 feet at them. And we just eventually drifted closer to them because of the wind. But when I play, you'll see 2 jigs drop down here about 13 and 16 feet. And these fish were so aggressive that they were hard to catch. There's a jig, and then watch the fish. They're shooting up 10 feet. And it was like comical how much we struggled to catch these fish because they wanted to eat. But for whatever reason, we couldn't. But, that's what we're looking for. And the cool thing about this is, like, as an angler, I make a decision if I want to catch fish. Crappies are, they like deeper water. And I know that when I pull them out of 20 foot plus, I'm more likely to kill them with barotrauma. If I'm going out to harvest fish, it's great. I don't mind where I catch them from. But, these ones, there was no concern of, them dying from that. But I can go catch one fish and say, yep, these are the ones I want to keep, or they're not. Let's just move on and find some shallower fish. There we go. So the last cool thing that I want to touch on, and I'm going to use Garmin terms here because that's what I have. I don't know what other brands call it, but Garmin has this mode. It's called perspective mode. You turn your transducer and you're able to see out in front of you. It's like a 135-degree angle. It's super effective in shallow water or fishing for fish that are in the top of the water column. So like salmon season, like this is a great way to go out and cast a bit. And you'll see a couple lines here when I click play, but this is a swamp that we were fishing. It's a max of 5 feet deep. It's super weedy. And we would go out there and fish with a forward-facing sonar, and you'd cut your hole and you'd see the fish flying away from you. And you'd go over there, cut a hole, and you'd see them flying away. But what we did is we put the graph into perspective mode, and we were able to actually see these fish swimming. You can just slightly see them moving. And then I'll pan out and you'll see my buddy, he's standing right on top of them. So what we did is we just sat there and watched them, and we figured out the corridors that they were swimming through these thick weeds. And we were able to go over there, cut holes, and then we had to wait because the fish spooked, but then they came back and they started swimming back through those corridors. And this next video, this is me standing on top of them. There's a fish, doesn't really want to bite. There's my jig, but oh, here comes his buddy. Comes up, eats it. 4.9 feet of water, but we struggle for years to catch crappies in this pond. And this was, the perspective mode changed how we fish it. Because with them being so spooky, there was no way for us to get on top of them. But once we learned that, it's just a waiting game. So now if I went back there without forward-facing sonar, I would just have to cut holes and sit there and wait and hope that I was in one of their corridors. Because with the weeds, the corridors change every year. So my experiences, I love it. I think it's a ton of fun. I take my kids out and they can just look at this and it makes sense. If I was looking at this when I was 3 or 7, like I wouldn't have known what it was. The biggest takeaway for you is fish are not always where you think. You think perch, okay, I'm going to fish the bottom. I'm fishing trout, like they're going to be where they're going to be. But I enjoy it. I've learned, I think, a lot more about fish and their habits and how much I can impact them in my boat or on foot. But there's nothing consistent. Things change minute by minute, day by day, like year to year. Like you might go back on the weed beds, John. I also think I cover a lot more water. I spend way more time just driving around looking as opposed to fishing. It's still fishing in my mind, but I don't know. I get to see a lot of water that I might have missed before. So that covers that. But the other thing, it's fun. Like I get to interact with fish. I'm not talking to them, but like I get to see every move they make. Like they'll fly in, and if I move my jig, sometimes they fly away. So like it's one of those things you learn how to jig to a fish as you see how they react for you. But it is super frustrating because like you'll see the fish, you still might not catch any of those. They're fish. They're prone to, or their goal in life is to survive. So I think anglers have to look out for the fish, but the fish are just, their end goal is to make it till the next day.
So hey, Dan Bushey here. Yeah, I've been using the live scope since it came out. My friend got it on his boat, and then I needed it because I went fishing without it, and I'm like, this is boring. I'm like, so I'm gonna say it probably the thing that it changed the most with my fishing is probably I fished all these spots when I was younger and everything, and when the fish didn't bite or something, I'm like, they're not here yet or so. So the live scope, you actually go to those spots and you'll be like, oh my God, there's loads of fish here. They're just not biting. So it really doesn't make you catch more fish, but it does make you kind of catch the, you can actually concentrate on the biggest fish too if you want to, like especially crappies and stuff. If you're on a tree, you can see the biggest crappie and keep putting your jig in front of that fish and target it. So this video is actually a bunch of carp in pretty shallow water, so you can really see their fins, especially if you look on the left side of the screen there. But you can see the hunched backs on them, and this one right here in the corner, you can actually see his fin and him turning. So it's very incredible, just the detail of it. And you can sit there and play with your detail so incredible that you can almost like see the exact shape of the fish and everything, and see their mouth open up almost, depending on the depth of water and everything. So,
Dan, I can just add a comment. I can remember last year you contacted me talking about, I don't know if it was East Carp, but a school of carp you had found in about 50 feet of water off the mouth of Otter Creek.
Yep.
But you didn't know what they were yet at the time?
Yeah.
And so this helped you figure it out.
Yeah.
And helped you actually catch one.
Yeah,
so that you could
actually
confirm what they were because you were looking for walleye.
Yeah, we were looking for walleye, and there was some fish, and they were 50 feet deep, and I'm like, God, what are these fish? So we kept going at them, and we were using a sonar and a blade bait, they're called, and we actually got one to bite it. And I'm like, oh my God, what is this? I'm like, this isn't fighting like a walleye. And then, it was a carp in 50 foot of water, using the live scope to figure out what it was and stuff. So we figured that out. So this is a big school of white perch this winter. This was actually like 80 foot of water, and I was just roaming around out in deeps. I was actually trying to look for whitefish out there, suspended. I saw these and I'm like, oh my God, hopefully those are crappies. But I drilled a hole, and they were probably 20 feet away or so when I drilled the hole, and I got them to come in, check out my jig. So you can see that one coming up to my jig right there. And that those white perch, actually, every time I drilled a hole, they would move probably 100 feet. So I couldn't stay on top of them, and I didn't have a lot of time. But if I had a lot of time, what I would have done is drilled tons of holes around there, and then every time they moved, I would have just hole hopped. And sometimes when I hole hop, I won't use my sonar just because it's 32 pounds. So I'll bring my Vexilar with me because that shows straight down. So for finding the fish, I'll use this live scope. For catching more of them or hole hopping, I'll use the Vexilar just because it's 3 pounds, 4 pounds, and I can hole hop really quick with it. And then I actually decided to use it trolling. So I don't know, you see, I'll play the video, but this is my downrigger ball right here. This is another downrigger ball on the other side of the boat. These are flashers up above my downrigger ball. And then this is the swivel to my bait. This is the lure. And you can actually see that all moving while you're trolling. And you can see the prop wash for the boat is actually right up here. So you see the motor moving and stuff. So you can see those flashers going. You can see the lure spinning. And that's 30 feet in back of the boat. So I'm looking 48 feet back. And I'm about trolling. It's springtime, so I'm in like 30 foot of water.
Where's Graham's tag salmon?
Yeah. So So this was cool because every single lake trout that comes in, like you're like, oh, there's no fish here or nothing. But every single lake trout that you pass by has to look at your lures. That thing, and sometimes they'll follow it. They'll follow it like 20 feet back and stuff, and they'll follow it for an hour. If you're trolling with that same lure for an hour, and then you try to do everything to catch it. You bounce the ball, you try to move it up and down, and they just keep following it. So, and it's funny because you wouldn't know that if you didn't have the live scope. So the salmon, when I was trolling for the salmon, it was hard to actually see them on the live scope because all of a sudden they would just shoot out of somewheres and it would be boom, a flash on the live scope. But the Lakers, they just love to just follow nonstop. And then I got a video of the sheephead. They're pretty much piling up to go into the river before springtime. And it's just crazy how many pile up there to head up the river to spawn or whatever they're doing to feed. So this is just tons of sheephead.
So you know these are sheep's head?
Yeah, because
you caught
yeah,
them.
we're catching them.
Can you identify them by, like you could with the carp?
Yeah, yep.
Now that you know what you're looking at?
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, and there's probably some like white perch mixed in the bottom because we caught some. There's probably some smallmouth mixed in and everything. But so yeah, I mean live scope changed. It's just like if I go out without it, it's kind of boring now. So and yeah, like Dylan said, a lot of times I'll go out and I won't even be fishing. I'll be searching for fish and I'll be like, oh, there's fish there, there's fish here. But the one thing is, yeah, you can pick out the bigger fish from the small fish. So if you see a really nice size crappie on a tree, you can just keep teasing that crappie to bite and make the little ones not bite your jig because you can keep. And then, yeah, another thing is like the whitefish this winter. My friend and I, we are fishing a hump. We were like, okay, we're going to go catch some smallmouth and some Lakers. And then we're like, all right, they're not biting today because we could see them on the live scope and none of them wanted to bite or play. So we're like, all right, let's just go around, check out another spot. We just drove with the four-wheeler. We're like, oh, let's just drill a hole out in this deep hole. And we drilled a hole and we're like, oh, wow, look at all these fish. They might be little Lakers. So we put a jig down and they were chasing it. And we're like, huh, all right. They don't want to bite it yet. So let's set up here and check, see what they are. And 5 minutes from setting up, boom, he got one. And it was a big whitefish. And then we're like, oh my God, these are all whitefish out here. So that was pretty cool and interesting. So, but now when I search around for with the four-wheeler with live scope, I'll just drive, drill a hole. I can look out 100 feet. I can see big schools of perch, be like, okay, do I want that? And then I'll drive again. I'll look in another spot. So it's pretty interesting, like how fast you can find a fish if you want to catch a fish and you don't have a lot of time. So, yep, that's pretty much it. So thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
Yep.
GG.
All right, so I'm gonna move a little quickly because when Shawn reached out to me about this, I got a little too excited and made too many slides. So I'm gonna move pretty quick through my presentation. So the first question I ask is live sonar for everyone? And I think my personal opinion on this is if you're not willing to let electronics change the way you fish, it's probably not a tool for you. I have a quick story. I have a buddy who's a bass angler. He spent his entire life, 40 plus years, really honing in on his shallow water presentation for bass. He is very proficient at it. He put live scope on his boat last year and he didn't change the way he fished. He just added it to the boat. And by the end of the year, he put that unit up for sale because it didn't change anything about the way his approach to fishing. So unless you're really willing to let it change you and the way you fish, I think, maybe just keep doing what you're doing and have fun. But if you're willing to make that change, I think there's a lot of benefits. So we'll start off with what to expect your first year with live scope. One of those things is I would say you are going to catch less fish. because you're going to spend way too much time when you see marks on the screen trying to get that thing to bite and you don't know it's time to move on. It can be pretty frustrating just because, there's this misconception that people think live sonar makes fish bite, and it's absolutely not true. So over time, you start to learn which fish are going to be catchable based on the reaction to your lure and your presentation. Usually within the first cast, honestly, you start to learn that. And as you do, and Dan said this as well, it starts to shift what you're doing from fishing to hunting for catchable fish. So what to expect after proficiency? To some extent, like we said before, you can tell what species you're looking at. So we'll watch this quick video here. These are all freshwater drum. One of the giveaways on them, freshwater drum have a very tall arc to the back of them and typically a really clear tail separation. Now, these look a lot like carp. Carp and drum look pretty similar on live sonar, but I can put a couple other things, information to really tell what they are. I was fishing rocks in this instance, and the fish were a little bit suspended. So I'm going to make the assumption based on the habitat that these are going to be drum and not carp. Whereas if I were fishing over mud and I see the same shaped fish, but it's on the bottom and I see bubble trails coming up from its mouth, that I'm going to assume those are carp rooting around in the mud for something to eat. So you start to learn how to tell the different species apart. So this next video, really, you start to shift from like, okay, fish identification, now you get into fish behavior. And LifeScope really, where it excels is watching fish behavior. So we'll start with this little green light night fishing video. So the green light, as you know, brings in the fish, brings in bait. And then after our bait is established in LifeScope, we start to see the smelt circling below the boat. You can also clearly see where the thermocline is. And below that thermocline, you'll see primarily your smelt, trout, and other cold water species. And then above that thermocline, you're going to find your panfish and other miscellaneous warm water species. So here we can see coming in from the right, I'll circle it for you. There's a rainbow trout that's chasing through that smelt eating. So with this information, I can get my jig into the right position where I know those rainbow trout are coming in from and predict where they're going to end up and put my lure right where they're going to be with the hope that maybe they'll choose to bite, which this one did, and here it is coming up through the school. So if you were looking at this with traditional HD sonar or down imaging, what you would see on the screen is just a hot mess. It would just be a solid ball of red. You wouldn't be able to tell anything about horizontal movement of the fish. You probably wouldn't even be able to see where your jig is because the marks are just so thick that the information you have available is just so much less than you get with live sonar. So here's another one talking about fish behavior. This is late in the fall when the lake trout move up shallow. So here we see my lure coming down, the lake trout are on the bottom. The moment that those lake trout react to me, I know it's on, so I can adjust my presentation, start initiating a chase coming up into the column until one of them finally will hopefully commit. And there you can even see that fish burping from coming up. It's pretty cool what you can see and start to learn about what species are doing and how they might be reacting to you. All right, so now others have touched on this too, but eliminating water. So, whereas seeing the behavior allows me to adjust, I can really use this tool as well to eliminate unproductive water to find what the fish are doing. And this is going to be a little short clip from the white crappie episode I released to Vermont Master Anglers, and I'll just show that really quickly. All right. Well, so basically what's happening is I'm scanning out. I have my sonar set to 100 plus feet out in front. So I'm scanning across the lake. My sonar is mounted to my trolling motor. So when I find a piece of structure, I can move in on that structure and I can really quickly see if there's any fish down there or not. In this case, they're a crappie. And that gives me information of whether I should stick around or maybe I should be moving on to find more productive water. So I've heard people say that 90% of the fish are in 10% of the lake. And so with forward-facing sonar and being able to scout 100 feet away in any direction that I point that transducer, I can really narrow down the lake a lot faster than with older traditional methods. The other thing I'll just interject too is that with some of the older sonars, you might see a lot of marks. And what live sonar taught me is that a lot of what you're seeing on those old HD units, air bubbles, they're debris floating through the lake. And live sonar really lets you pick apart what's actually alive that you might want to target.
Are you operating that with a hook now?
I am, yeah. It's attached to my trolling motor. Yeah. Okay, so then another thing is structure detail. You can see detail in things. One of the things you can expect to learn with live sonar is lakes that you've spent your entire life fishing or areas of lakes. You can expect to learn a lot more about what's actually down there. So prior to getting live sonar, this is an area of the lake where I assumed this was just a hump. My old fish finder just showed me, whoop, there's a blip up there, I'm gonna go fish that hump. When I put live sonar down, all of a sudden I can see, whoa, that's a log crib filled with rocks. And so in addition to that, as we watch the video, I have some other information that'll show me. So I'll see bubble trails on the left there, which you're gonna see in just a second. Bubble trails coming up from carp, which are feeding on the bottom. I see my crappie and smallmouth on top of that crib, and there was a pile of rock bass down there at the bottom. I know that each of these are different species because I targeted each section and caught them. So it also helps you break down a single structure and find how species may be mixing together or separating from each other. But that's a lot of detail that you can see when looking at a structure that can be really eye-opening compared to previous methods and even areas that you've fished for a very, very long time. It's eye-opening to what's actually down there. Okay, and so also, it's just way more engaging for kids as well. So this is a day on Lake Champlain, ice fishing. We were out there for about 7 hours, myself and my 10-year-old son. We did not catch a single fish that entire day. But that whole day, consistently, we got to watch fish coming in, sniffing the lure, running away from it. It was active all day, even though we didn't get to bring anything to the surface. When we went home, instead of the kid whining to mom that we didn't catch anything, he was like, we saw fish all day. They were interacting with us. Like, he was still very excited about that. So this is also, it's a great way to bring new anglers into the sport. The technology, it just provides an extra level of information. Had we not had this on this very long, very cold ice fishing day, it would have just felt like we were staring down a hole in the void and there was nothing down there. And, probably would have been a very different experience for my son. So potential dangers I was asked to speak about. I would say, I think the primary potential danger is in the panfish realm and probably more specifically crappie. There are times of the year when crappie will ball up. And so you've seen this a couple times in other presentations, but here's a big school of crappie. If this is a smaller body of water, I think one of the dangers is, I've witnessed this on some very small lakes, during the time of the year where they school up, you could have almost the entire spawning population of crappie in 1 or 2 balls. So if you have anglers that are really not that conservation minded, that might go out there day after day after day and hit that same school during that narrow time of the year, they could have a pretty negative impact on the fishery. But that's why we have things like catch limits, total keep limits. And I know that Shawn said they're keeping an eye on it. If they start to see fish size decline, maybe time to start looking at different size limits or things like that to help protect the species. But I'm a multi-species angler. I fish for basically anything that I see that moves that I can try to catch. And honestly, over the time that I've been using this technology and using other technologies, I'm much less concerned about what this as an emerging popular item is doing to our fisheries than some of the other emerging things that in Vermont that become more popular in recent years, like, for example, bow fishing with laser sights for some of our native species like gar and bowfin. But again, it's something to keep our eye on and make sure there's not a problem there. So my parting thoughts, I thought I'd end with a meme because Shawn started with a meme. But now that I have this on my bow, I don't leave home without it. It has really changed the way that I fish. I can still go out without it and catch fish, but it just provides so much more information. And also, when I was younger, I could go out and waste, 16, 17-hour days on the water and not catch much and still be happy. Now that I have kids and they're wanting to come with me, I have less time and I need to make that time that I have more productive. And so speaking of that, I've raised a little bit of a screen hog pushing me off the bow of my own boat. So next year I've converted my ice fishing rig to the back of the boat and pushing the kid back to the back again. We'll each have our own screen. But he is thoroughly hooked into fishing, and I attribute a lot of that to this sonar. And I'm excited to see what it does for him over a lifetime, because at 6 and 7 years old, he was already proficient with electronics and finding fish. So by the time he's my age, he's going to be so much further along than I was. And so that's basically what I have. Thank you.
Well, I really wasn't planning on having this set of presentations turn into like a debate, or I like it, I don't like it, or anything like that. So, I didn't want to start at the end of the presentation kind of create that sort of open forum debate. But I just thought I would put up some of the pros and cons that I have heard from these guys. Seen in their presentations, saw in other things like the American Fisheries Society presentation about what anglers are saying and what managers are saying, and there's certainly pros and cons to both sides. I thought I would ask these guys a few questions. I heard a common theme throughout the three presentations that it doesn't necessarily make fish bite, and I've been out there at times with these guys and seen that firsthand myself. To my perspective, I think something that Dan said earlier was, without the live scope, I wouldn't have known that was happening. And to me, growing up without this technology and still not having it, when I go out, say, ice fishing, I'm more or less blind. I don't know what fish are doing. I don't even know if they're there unless I catch one and kind of confirm it to myself, and then I might stay. Live scope, to me, cuts that learning curve down. They all mention how much they move around to try to find fish. And once you find fish, you can start focusing your efforts in that spot. Finding fish, I think, is one of the first major obstacles you're facing as an angler going out onto the water or the ice, is first finding them. So finding them can shorten the learning curve for sure. When you don't know that they're there, you can't adjust your tactics. But live scope, for me, I've seen some of these videos here, you can change what you're doing to make a fish bite. Dylan said it won't make a fish bite, and that's 100% true. But if I'm not watching the fish react to my lure, I'm going to keep doing the same thing I always do. But if I see that they're doing something different, then I can change what I do that might entice them to bite. Would that be accurate? So yeah, I think this is opening up a whole new world of fishing success, and I think this is really great. Zach's example of Fisher, who's a great kid and outfishes me every time I've been out with him. These are the anglers we're looking at for the future to stay engaged and participating in angling. From a fisheries manager perspective, that presentation I showed at the beginning, these are some of the things that were highlighted in that presentation. Some of these, how does that affect catch rate? Is there, increased numbers of fish being caught? Are they, able to more successfully catch bigger fish? These are all things that we in this room as fish biologists and fisheries managers need to come to terms with, try to figure out whether there's a case or not a case, for us to adjust regulations. And that's part of what we do as part of our role. And those roles have an objective of maintaining and sustaining the quality of fisheries that we currently have and enjoy. And if there's something that might be a risk to that, then we need to, take steps to address it. I don't think we're there yet. The studies are just being started nationwide on all kinds of different species to understand where this fits into fishing participation and fishing success rate. Dylan mentioned increased post-release mortality, barotrauma. He's very conscientious of what he's doing out there when he goes out. So he's targeting fish in maybe deeper water because that's where he found them, but he may be less likely to spend time there because he's concerned that if he's not going to harvest those fish, then he doesn't want to catch them because he thinks letting them go is basically a harvested fish anyways. And there's been some studies that are starting to point towards that. You might sit on a school of walleye that are deep and catch 50 of them because it's fun and you're letting them go. You can't think that all 50 of those are going to survive if you're pulling them up from very deep water, especially if they're not handled properly. Correct me if I'm off target here anyway. So, these are, the sort of the back and forth that we're having internally as biologists about, how does this affect us and our ability to manage the fisheries for everybody's benefit in the future. I'll just leave it with that unless there's questions for the presenters or any biologists in the room.
Shawn, I'll just add in on the barotrauma a bit. One of the other interesting uses of it is when you release a fish, you get to watch the fish swim away. And it's actually one of the fun parts of doing it when you put the fish back and seeing it take off. And one of the other added pieces of information it gives you is if your fish goes down and isn't able to overcome the trauma of puffing up when they come up, and you see the fish come back up and you know where that fish has surfaced, and you can go to that fish to either keep it for harvest or to try to assist it a little bit getting it back down. Not that it's necessarily going to survive, but if it floats up, it's definitely not. And so it gives you another point of information. You can see if they're not making it back down to the bottom.
Yeah. A couple of questions up front here, and then Jason in the back.
I wanted to ask a question about equity. This is fairly expensive a year, and so there are a lot of folks who can't enjoy it. Is that something you think about?
It's actually part of the discussion. It was a big part of the one of the presentations in the research symposium that I showed the link to online, American Fisheries Society. The equitability of, is there now going to be anglers that are able to, have more than their fair share of fishing opportunities and fish harvest rates because they can afford the technology. I think like all technology, at some point, the price point is going to come down and it's going to be pretty affordable, as this stuff is on the market more and more companies are putting them out there. But yeah, that is being talked about. But I think it was pointed out in that same presentation that, that's a social or societal thing that is impossible for us to affect or manage in any kind of way. Jason,
just responding to that, Rick.
Sure.
That already exists now. I mean, there's anglers who can't afford boats, and we recognize that, and we try and manage for shore fisheries and tributary fisheries. So, yeah, that's something we always consider in fisheries management, is trying to spread the opportunities on.
But I'm looking at I'm writing about this access to the lake. The folks who don't have a boat are a vast minority. You don't have nearly as many facilities for them as you do for people who have boats.
So, well, I think when we talked earlier, any boat launch that my program manages, you can fish from shore. So the number of access sites isn't the same. I think where you could go with a boat might be different.
Well, but the species are different right around a ramp than they are out into the lake.
Yeah, I was just saying, we agree there's equity issues that's been around for a long time, and this is just one more piece of technology that raises those standards.
Well, we are in an exciting time so when this unit first came out, it was like $6,000. Then a couple years later, it drops down to about $4,000, now $3,000, and new versions just came out that are you can get a full unit, transducer and setup for $800, which is similar to buying an older style HD just map unit. So the price is already rapidly dropping.
Yep. Jason?
Yeah, can you record the video within the sonar, within the system itself, to create videos of what you're seeing?
Yeah, so it depends on the models. There's 3 different ways. So obviously you saw some videos where we're recording with our cell phones. The other way is some of the units will broadcast to your phone and you can record from your phone. That also allows you to have a secondary screen anywhere in the boat that is within range of the initial unit. And then the more expensive models can record directly to SD cards as if they were, a recording device like any camera or anything else.
Give me one more, Shawn, in there.
Sure. Right there. Red shirt.
With power consumption, if you go out of your boat, would you need a dedicated battery to run the unit on the transducer?
There's mixed feelings, and other people can chime in on this. In my boat, I run it off of my cranking battery, but I have a lithium cranking battery that is a very high capacity battery, so I don't worry about power. I can fish for a week without even using anything other than electronics and my trolling motor and not charging. But yeah, it's a consideration, especially with lead acid batteries. These units do draw a lot of power. But now battery technology is getting so light and portable that a lot of people some people are just using their ice fishing caddies and mounting them to the boat, and that has a battery integrated. Other people are installing separate batteries in their boat. It depends on your battery technology.
We good? We got one more.
Yeah, one more, and then we'll bring all the
right.
presenters up.
How could you ban the technology? Because like I know, sometimes when I'm on my boat, I have an underwater camera, and my wife just likes looking at the fish. Just because you have something on the boat, doesn't mean that someone is, if you ban the technology, people may just want to, like it was said, using it for kids to entertain them.
Yeah, I think in the early years of this technology coming out, when it was, first being seen how effective it could be, in the right situations, there was calls mostly from the angling community of people that didn't have it saying this ought to be banned, it's too successful. And, some states, a lot of them out in the Midwest kind of listened and investigated and came to their own conclusions that, as you're pointing out, it's not feasible or reasonable to ban technology. You're be constantly chasing the next generation or the next evolution of whatever's coming next after this. And that, I think I said at the beginning of the presentation, those calls have kind of died down now. It's not really anywhere that, Fish and Wildlife agencies are going. But they do continue to, research and look into the potential ways that it might impact, things like, catch and harvest rate. So, yeah, I don't think you'll ever see this technology banned. They're talking about the same thing with cell phone based hunting, trail cams, that's another generation or iteration of trail cam technology that the same conversations happened with those, where you get a real time at the moment notification that a 10-point buck is standing in front of your blind and you better get there so you can shoot it. So those conversations happen every time something new comes along that increases people's, perceived success rate in hunting and fishing. Good?
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you. So let's make announcements.
Something a little bit more static. This is our version of forward-facing hardware. Doesn't move much, but somebody had to do a bad dad joke. I guess I was it. So, a little louder? All right. So, this is a resistance board weir on the Boquet River. And this project was a cooperative project between the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and New York State DEC. I asked my staff if they could throw a piece of the weir into my car, and they kind of laughed at me and said, no. What you're looking at is 20-foot sections of PVC pipe for the most part, capped off, and there's aluminum brackets that kind of hold everything in place. Just to kind of give you a sense, you can see that the weir goes across the river, and the thing on the left is an aluminum trap. Basically, it's a minnow trap, just bigger, different dimensions. So I'm going to talk about the installation, what it did, how it worked, and where we're going. And mostly I want to kind of explain to you what it is because it's new. It's new to us. So what you're seeing is the staff installing the only part that you'll see right now. So when this thing is not in trapping mode, the only part down there is this angle iron, which is pinned to the river bottom. So you can still kayak over it, you can still canoe over it, you can walk over it. And we don't have to do this hard part, which required some heavy pneumatic equipment to pound the rebar into the river bottom. And obviously these parts are pretty heavy, but we have a Tony for that, so we're good to go. And here's a couple good photos. You can see those are just capped off PVC pipes. And one of the benefits of this design and this manufacturer is if something breaks, we can likely go to the local hardware store and fix it. So that is wonderful. And what I kind of wanted to point out here is you can see how they lay on the bottom, but then there's those solid plates underneath. And hopefully that when there's flow, those are what provide the resistance to help the buoyancy of the entire trap flow. Obviously, we're in pretty low water conditions. Last year was really kind of an odd fall. This is in August, late August, because we wanted to start trapping in the first part of September. A couple more pictures. We definitely had to move around some rocks to kind of get this thing in the right spot. Because it's so modular, we could stick the trap anywhere within those panels. It's just like Legos, essentially. And we also, the part they're working on there is kind of the downstream chute. We also provide that for the fish. And when these flows, and obviously it's ankle deep, we're guessing where to put this stuff. We were guessing where to put the trap. And that was part of last year's adventure, was learning how to do this. Lots of sandbags to hold down that rail. Keep this thing in place. Now you're looking at it from the other direction. Again, you're looking at service staff and DEC staff. You can walk on this thing, which is great. This thing is designed for debris, trees, whatever, to go off of it. If it doesn't, we go out there with a rake and clean it off. And again, that's that downstream chute. Hopefully, fish go up, get trapped, we process them, we put them back upstream above the dam, above the weir, excuse me. If they want, they can go back down through. We're seeing it a little bit more advanced. And those panels, we could set those at different angles to try to help this thing with its buoyancy when there's water. Obviously here we're just playing still. But now we're getting there. That's the gap where the trap is. And you're looking all the way across. I don't remember how many days it took to put it in.
It was about 3 days.
3 days. We did have an expert from the manufacturer come and help us because this is all new to us. Then we got the drones out and did some flying. You can see that downstream chute on the right side, and you can see the trap on the left side. Pretty neat. We were really excited waiting for the water. And there it is. There's that same old minnow trap, just different. .94 CFS for Boquet River. That's pretty low. So now we're in waiting game for the water to come up, for the fish to come up. Part of last year, a big part of it was to figure out how we work this. This is different. It's new. Well, every day we were looking at the flows, wondering when do we put this thing in trap mode, because we don't want to miss the fish. We also don't want to interrupt what they want to do. We just want to get our data and move on. Why? So we've already talked about, Kurt's talked about the parental-based tagging. It's not easy to go out there in October, November in a dry suit to try to run a hoop net to hopefully catch the fish in your hoop net to process them. It's a lot easier to go to Don Lee and his buddies and say, thank you for the fin clip. Go enjoy fishing again. But yeah, well, that's your enjoyment for the day. So the Boquet River kind of provides us, it's almost too big. It's too wide. The fish can go too many places. So this was a really good solution to try to trap all of them, which is really good for us because we can get hopefully every adult salmon going up that stream. And it's designed specifically, I should have said this in the beginning, for the Lake Champlain salmon. This was kind of West Coast technology, downsized a little bit because those specific fish are a little bit bigger. 804 CFS, and you can see a bunch of debris. We got to adjust it. So this was like one rain event that happened, significant rain event. And this was a piece of equipment we had to watch the weather daily, and we had to be ready to jump daily. There's a little video so you can get a sense. Pan a little more. But the nice thing is we can go out there, we can remove this debris, and we can go on, get it into a different set of flow regime. So here you could see actually it kind of working a little bit better. The forward edge is up above the water. Everything will go right across it coming from downstream. There's more water where the trap is. There's more water where the downstream chute is. 181 CFS. Okay, so we know 200 is probably going to work really well, and that should be attracting the fish to come up the river. Need a ladder and a net. So fairly simple to work. And that's right near the shore. So it should be a lot easier for us to handle the fish. So that's a benefit for us. We're not playing in really deep water. Why are we doing this? Right there. You can see the lovely smile. I'm pretty sure that's Kurt buried under some clothing. We're doing this to collect these samples because we need to know where these fish are coming from, when they were stocked, who they were, you know, this whole parental-based tagging. It's trying to collect that data to get us to the next step of understanding and to adjust our management. Take the measurements, move the fish. So I thought this was, you know, as a middle manager that I am, I thought the price point was really interesting. It might be a lot for a bunch of PVC pipe, but this thing's fishing every day for 3 months for 5 years right now. That's our plan for 5 years. We would blow that budget on a staff and a half for 1 year. So by middle of next season, that thing's paid for and it's earning. It's doing really well. Last year, we had to open for 38 days. A lot of flow, funkiness, you know, at that 100 CFS and lower, it just was not working. And it wasn't worth keeping it open. We did process 118 fish. Kurt, how many fish did we get in the Boquet the year before?
I think it was 38.
38.
Like that.
Yeah. So historically, we've kind of had a hard time getting that many fish. 118 is a big step. And again, that was with some really weird flows. So 61 Atlantic salmon, had 4 recaps. I think that might be I think we might have had 11 recaps.
We had 11 recaps at the Air Fletcher Fish Pet. I'll just be U.S. Fish and Wildlife. We had 19 individual fish in the Weir with 11 recaps, so 108 different individuals that were trapped.
So significant increase from what we had before with a simple piece of technology, some aluminum, some PVC, and moving around some sandbags and rocks. Really increased our effectiveness. And what we're hoping is the data that we're going to collect from this device will better inform our stocking. We also changed our stocking last year with the hopes of getting a higher rate of return. We were stocking smolts in the Boquet system pretty far up, about 52. Some of the sites were 52 kilometers up from the mouth. So significant change. Now most of the sites, the 3 sites that we are stocking, are much closer to the lake. So hopefully over the 5 years, again, takes 3 years for these fish, some of them to return, we'll get a real good sense. Did we improve our recruitment going back to the Boquet? Because the previous data you saw, a lot of fish from the Saranc are what we're handling. Well, what can we change in this system? And this device is going to allow us to collect that data to answer that question, to hopefully improve that return in the Boquet, just like what we're kind of seeing in the Saranc, which leads into doing that work at the Cascades. So hopefully over time, we're going to keep increasing the amount of returns, get them into the Boquet, which they currently have lots of miles of pretty decent habitat because of the other work that the service is doing. So this is kind of just one piece of the tool that ties into all the other different research and science that we've been doing within the system on Atlantic salmon. So there's some more numbers. 67, so 50-50 on the sex ratio, 28 inches or max. 1 brown trout, Bernie.
just for you. So it's pretty effective, and we were really satisfied. We were very frustrated. We unfortunately lost our partner during the governmental shutdown, and the flows just were not working with us at all. It was very frustrating, but we're pretty happy, and we're hoping the next 4 years we'll learn more how to process this thing, when to adjust it, and maybe we'll get a little bit more stable flows, and we'll increase that number even more. Before we had put it into trap mode, we all kind of played Price is Right game, see how many fish we would get. And I threw 300 out there. I kind of think if we had normal flows, we would have been there, and I would have won the kudos. But here's some data on the flows, and that big blue spike, that was one rain event for one day, and that's what we're dealing with. It would go for a week, and we wouldn't see another rain event. There just was real high events, real high water flows, and then it would die right down. But we were seeing the fish when those flows were there. So if Mother Nature will work with us, I think we'll have an even better time. And the green lines are when we had the fish, when we were catching the fish. And this is, part of the information that we're going to continuously collect to try to make it better and our understanding of how to process this new piece of equipment better. And with that, I'll take some questions if anybody has any.
Is there any plans for other tributaries to use this system? Like, I don't know, Saranc too wide or something because of dams and stuff, but other...
Yeah, we haven't really talked about that yet, but I think, once we're done with it here for 5 years, we're going to ask that question of ourselves.
Sable, maybe?
Maybe. I mean, the Sable has got some pretty significant natural falls, so it's not historically a great salmon watershed, but we're going to definitely ask that question of ourselves, where else we can use this and how else can we use it. Yep.
Hi, folks. Thanks for coming today. I'm going to talk a little bit today about connectivity projects in general in the Lake Champlain Basin, and then specifically about some of the projects we're working with partners on in the Boquet. But before I do that, this is a partial list of partners on the New York side of Lake Champlain Basin. You should know that there's similar efforts happening in Vermont with other partners or some of the same partners. It happens to be me up here today talking from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. I'm a biologist out of the Lake Champlain office with U.S. Fish and Wildlife. But these partners all working together are what make these projects happen. So it happens to be me here. It could easily be someone from Boquet River Association, someone from TU, someone from DEC, etc. Any number of these people could be given the same presentation because they only happen by us all working together. I'll come back to partnerships in a minute. First, when we think about Lake Champlain, I appreciate being able to go right after Rob. I encourage folks to think beyond just the lake. It's a big lake, 435 square miles, 120 miles long. But the basin itself, that includes all the rivers and streams that flow into it. We're talking 8,000 square miles, right? Over 14,000 miles of river that feed into the lake. 90% of the water that goes into the lake flows through the rest of the basin first. So we can't talk about the state of the lake without thinking about the state of the rivers and streams, the arteries that feed into the lake. So New York, home to a lot of native fish and mussel species. And these fish, they need to move, right? A lot of you are fishermen, you know that fish move. They move all the time, they have to. And especially in rivers, they got to be able to get from one section of a river to another. Some sections of the river might be great for spawning, other sections great for foraging. You might have cold water areas that are great for the hot summer months, deeper water areas great for the colder summer months. Fish need free-flowing, unobstructed rivers to thrive. And when we have connected streams, unobstructed rivers, right, it doesn't just benefit fish, it benefits the flow of water, natural flow regimes, natural temperature regimes that are important, that all these organisms have adapted over many, many years to become accustomed to. And these rivers don't just move fish, they also move other material, right? So things like wood, rocks, sediment, they all move through these river systems when they're free flowing, and they're supposed to, they have to. So the benefits to free flowing streams though, right? Not just for fish. They benefit people too. So these are just some statistics from New York State about hunting and fishing. Over $2 billion with a B in economic activity, right? Almost $1 billion in retail sales, 11,000 jobs supported. We need to have healthy river systems. We need to have free-flowing rivers. We need to have clean lakes. We need to have healthy fish populations in order to support this. So this is for people too. So what's the problem, right? The problem is that a lot of our rivers are obstructed, and they're obstructed almost always by man-made barriers at road stream crossings. The most common culprit, culverts, something most of us don't think about a lot. What kinds of problems are they causing? Well, most of the culverts that are in place right now are too small. That's the first problem. So what happens when you get a culvert that's too small? Think about when you have a hose in the summertime and you put your thumb over the nozzle. What happens? The water starts shooting out really fast, right? Same thing happens in a river. You have a culvert that's too small in a stream, you get heavy rain, and you end up with a fire hose in your stream. So what happens when you get a fire hose? Well, first of all, fish can't move through it. Second of all, the culvert is too small to be able to pass the materials it's supposed to pass. Third of all, when you got a fire hose in a stream, on the downstream side, you end up with scour, big pool. If you guys like to swim in rivers, you look to the downstream side of culverts, right? Well, that's happening because the culvert is too small and it's scouring a big hole there. Pretty soon you've got a perched culvert like you see right there. Sometimes you get situations like that where the water is too shallow, spread across the entirety of the bottom of that culvert because there's no natural features in there. So you just get sheet flow, really thin sheet flow across the whole culvert. And this is a problem that's much more widespread than you might think. According to surveys that have been done on these culverts, in New York State, only about 4% of all the culverts in New York State, we're talking many, many thousands of culverts. Only about 4% of them provide full connectivity. 96% of the culverts in New York State are impeding fish passage and impeding natural stream function. That's a big, big number. It's a big problem. So we want appropriate crossings. When we have appropriate road crossings, like I said, they can help to maintain fish habitat, wildlife habitat. In addition, they help protect roads and public safety, right? Again, not just a fish issue, not just a wildlife issue, but a human issue. So what are we doing about it? Well, first of all, this is what we're trying to avoid. These kind of catastrophic failures, right? These things happen more often than you might think. And when they happen, not always to this level, of course, these are extreme examples, but when it happens, it's obviously bad for fish and wildlife. It's bad for budgets. It's bad for towns. It's bad for county governments. It's bad for public safety for sure. It's bad for Lake Champlain in general. Where do you think all that debris is going to end up? All that sediment, right? It's going to end up in the lake. This is actually pretty dramatic footage of a culvert failing. So what are we doing about it? Well, I have to go back to partnerships now, right? So this is an organization on the New York side of Lake Champlain Basin, the North Country Stream Coalition. It's a fairly new coalition of folks working on these kinds of issues. We've got over 30 regional partners. They include folks like New York State DEC, New York State DOT, Boquet River Association, Sable Freshwater Center, the Adirondack Council, a lot of county governments, a lot of town government folks are there. All parties who are interested in improving these road stream crossings for various reasons. So Fish and Wildlife Service, we're there because we're interested in protecting a natural resource in certain trust species. We're talking Atlantic salmon, brook trout, wood turtle, American eel. There may be towns there who are there only because they want to protect their roads, right? Well, we have the same goal. In fact, we end up having similar goals, which is to try and replace these problem structures. So we're working together. A few more highlights, just in the couple of years we've been together, we've put 7 or 8 projects on the ground. We've got more than 40 crossings in the planning phase, so that'll be on the ground in the next few years. And importantly, by working as a collective, we're able to leverage a lot more funding for these projects. So this is funding just since 2023 that partners have been able to leverage for these kind of projects. On the New York side of the Lake Champlain Basin, about 8 million. That number needs to be updated. That number is more than that. So over $8 million now. When you consider the rest of the working area outside of the basin too, that number increases to almost $15 million. Importantly, and I'll emphasize this again, these are projects that not only support connectivity and fish passage, they support infrastructure, they support flood resilience, they support public safety, they support local economies too, because we end up hiring local contractors, local engineers, et cetera. So this is money coming into a lot of communities in the North Country. Again, also happening in Vermont. So to shift focus a little bit here, I'm going to talk about some of the specific projects. A few of them last year, I talked about some stuff on the Saranc. This year, I'll talk about the Boquet. But in general, in the basin since 2022, we've got 12 projects that were completed. Another 19, actually that should be 20 projects now that are funded to get on the ground by 2028. We anticipate all 20 of those projects. A couple more that we think we'll be getting funding for soon. On the Boquet, quite a few projects as well. That represents quite a few of the projects I mentioned. We try to work on a sub-watershed level. So looking at Cold Brook, there's a tributary to the North Branch Boquet. Really nice habitat up there for brook trout, for Atlantic salmon. Since 2022, we've gotten 5 projects on the ground there to improve connectivity. There's only 3 barriers that remain now, and the entirety of Cold Brook will be completely open, completely unobstructed. We have funding in place. Those 3 projects are all getting engineered, and we have funding in place for 2 of them to actually be implemented. One's going this year, the next one's going 2027. The third one, we're raising funds, and we anticipate we should be able to go by 2028. So real happy about that. It's going to be very exciting to get the entirety of Cold Brook open. Notably, at the mouth of Cold Brook, we found salmon redds. So we're hoping salmon are going to start moving up through Cold Brook soon and spawning up there. This is a dam removal at the mouth of Cold Brook. This was done in 2022. That was the first project we did to start opening up that little watershed. In 2024, we went back, we replaced this culvert with this nice bridge, replaced this culvert with a much more appropriately sized structure. And I'll just show one of the projects that's scheduled to go in 2027. This one is being led by Boquet River Association. It's much bigger than it looks in this photo. I should have had a person in there for scale. But I wanted to show you this because if you have a look at that, it doesn't look like a regular culvert because it's not. It's a big oil tank. This kind of stuff is typical. You see this all the time because the town, the folks who are running these towns are always underfunded. They're working as hard as they can. They're awesome. And they're keeping the roads open. But this is the kind of stuff they have to work with. So when we have collectives working together, raising funds and making these projects happen, we're helping these local towns too to resolve stuff like this. next subwatersheds, Twist Mill Brook, and then Derby Brook as well. Beautiful cold water habitat up in there. Lots of brick trout. Salmon have been stocked in there too. So we've got baby salmon up there. We've got 4 barriers to fish passage that are quite significant. We are getting all those engineered. We got funding for that. They're all getting engineered right now. And full funding has been secured for one of them, partial funding for another one. So again, these are projects they're going to be getting on the ground in the next couple of years. Here's just photos of a couple of them. And you can see the kinds of problems we have. I mean, you see that culvert on the left. Nothing's getting up through that. And nothing is passing through that the way it should. Some other projects include this project here, Phelps Brook at Roscoe Road. We replaced those 2 undersized structures. This is a road that was overtopped annually. A total barrier to fish passage at certain flows, now completely open and free flowing. That was a TNC-led project. This is a small dam near Elizabethtown on the Boquet. Boquet River Association is leading the charge to get this dam out this summer. As part of that project, the Essex DPW is going to be removing this dilapidated bridge and the 2 abutments that are also impeding natural flow. Huge crossing here at Moss Road. We know salmon have gone all the way up to this crossing here. At certain flows, this is a total barrier to fish passage. That's going this year, by the way, this one. Another one that's going this year, Hale Hill Lane here at Church Brook. Again, total barrier to fish passage at many of the flows. And the last thing I'll show you here is the Willsboro Cascades, which we've talked about quite a bit now. Like I had mentioned, we're going to be working on mapping the bedrock, a very high resolution map of the bedrock there to try and figure out where the pinch points are for migratory salmon, which will then bring to fish passage engineers and brainstorm what solutions might make sense for mitigating the situation there. So that's what I got to show to you today, and I'm happy to take questions if I have time. How are we doing? Couple minutes? Yeah, Tom.
I just want to applaud you very much, David, the work that's being done on the Boquet River and aquatic algae and passage. It's just incredible what's happening. And I'm really hoping that choke point at the Cascade is going to really hinder. But if I also, as a point, how far salmon go upriver, you know where the campgrounds is. Just below that, I know a person caught 2 salmon in August.
In August, wow.
In August. The other thing I wanted to ask you, how far up historically have we seen, or do we know of salmon going up Cold Brooks? And by the way, that bridge is $2 million that's been raised by you guys.
Yeah, that's going to be a huge bridge there. Yeah. So historically, the only salmon that I know of that historically have been in Cold Brook are salmon that were stocked there by the state in the 90s. Does that sound right? Rob, Nicole?
I think so.
Yeah, I only know that because I've seen tags on the trees, and then you've spoken about it a little bit. But there's been a dam there. You know, that dam that I showed you was was obstructing fish passage into Cold Brook for, I think that was built in the 50s, in the 1950s, and there weren't salmon in the lake before that. So salmon haven't, as far as I know, there have been no salmon at Cold Brook at all. And now they should be able to have access to it. And by 2028, I think, they'll have access to the entirety of that Cold Brook subwatershed, some 14, 15 miles or so of nice cold water habitat.
Marvelous work. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Just as a reminder, the Lake Champlain Basin Program is a federally authorized organization. So the governors of New York, Vermont, and the Premier of Quebec got together and said the water in Lake Champlain and its watershed are very valuable and we want to do something about it. So our organization works in New York, Vermont, and Quebec on things related to water quality, healthy ecosystems, cultural heritage, and education and outreach. I'm here to talk to you specifically about invasive species. As just a quick overview reminder, we're talking about non-native species that cause some kind of harm, either to the economy, the environment, or human health. You're all familiar with three very common ones in Lake Champlain, our Eurasian water milfoil populations, the zebra mussel, and the alewife. What we try to message with the public is that though we have 51 known non-native invasive species in Lake Champlain, only about a dozen of those have been measured to cause some kind of harm. So the darker green on the far left graphic shows about a dozen of those species being invasive, and some of them are non-native, but we elected to put them in Lake Champlain, maybe for our enjoyment of fishing. We are tracking the number of known non-native and invasive species in other water bodies that are connected to Lake Champlain, like the Great Lakes, the St. Lawrence, and the Hudson rivers, and those all have a greater number of non-native and invasive species. And the point here is that we have a lot to protect in our watershed. We have about 70% of the inland water bodies in the Adirondack Park are free of invasive species, and just about 75% of the water bodies in the state of Vermont are free of aquatic invasive species. And we're all connected. We move between them frequently. Just some key highlights of the species that you likely interact with that are invasive in Lake Champlain. We had the fishhook water flea and the spiny water flea infestations that foul downriggers. We have watercraft inspection decontamination programs that help remove and decontaminate fouled fishing lines at our popular access points to Lake Champlain. We are investigating, again, a new discovery of this clam called corbicula, or golden clam, in the Southern Lake at the South Bay boat launch. This is likely a hop or a skip of an infestation either from Lake George, the Champlain Canal, or Lake Bomoseen, where we've had previous established populations, surprisingly ahead of Lake Champlain. I wanted to also touch briefly on water chestnut. We spend well over $600,000 annually on managing water chestnut in Lake Champlain, and we've been able to push the really dense populations of water chestnut from about the Crown Point location south down to the Dresden Narrows. We have had threats and zeroed out budgets for the first time in decades for this funding from the Army Corps of Engineers in the Water Resources Development Act. So we've had to reallocate funding to cover a very large and expensive program. It's really critical because we know and we track over time how much money we spend and what the populations are doing. And what this graphic is really showing is in about 1990, 1992, we had a loss of some funding for the program, and our populations rebounded very significantly. So we lost a lot of ground, which is a very convincing story when we talk with our partners about the need to continue doing water chestnut management in Lake Champlain. There's been a lot of talk about round goby. I don't think we have to review all of the details about it, but it is not from here, right? Native to the Black and Caspian Seas. It likes shallow areas and rivers. It's an aggressive, hardy benthic species that we're really concerned about outcompeting some of the native fish in Lake Champlain, primarily the sculpin and some of our darters. We don't want to lose that diversity in Lake Champlain. Goby are able to transmit viral hemorrhagic septicemia, the fish disease. They predate on some of our native species eggs, especially with the recent recruitment of lake trout and that recovery. We don't want that threatened. They are aggressive bait stealers and would likely change the experience of anglers on Lake Champlain. And this became a high priority for a lot of resource managers in the basin when round goby moved across the Erie Canal to the confluence of the Mohawk and the Hudson rivers from the Great Lakes. And that raised our awareness to also start tracking round goby in the St. Lawrence Seaway and their slow progression up the Richelieu River towards Lake Champlain. So partnerships matter, as David started off with his presentation. I'll end there, but I hope that that's a piece that you're going to take away from the presentation here. We hold meetings almost every other month, and then during the field season every month, if not more frequently, on round goby early detection and monitoring. There's good news and bad news. The bad news is round goby are slowly getting closer to Lake Champlain by our tracking of their movement up the Richelieu River. The good news is partners are working aggressively on this issue. We have interim control measures that we're looking at, as well as long-term solutions. So this round goby detection at the confluence of the Mohawk and the Hudson Rivers has really, I would say, put us into fifth gear in moving forward with addressing the canalways as a pathway for introduction of invasives to Lake Champlain. So we've got a lot of efforts going on. We have some bait fish signage we've developed. You guys are the eyes and the ears out there. You are gonna see this likely first if it occurs. So thank you for getting in touch with your state agencies, reporting if you see something that looks abnormal. Our round goby have that fused pelvic fins. That's different from the splayed pelvic fin on our native sculpin. Sometimes we get reports of fish regurgitated out of whichever fish you're fishing for in Lake Champlain. Those are really helpful to make those reports to the state agencies and let us know what's going on. So far, all reports have been sculpin. That's great. There's a lot of that, but that's good, and reporting it is important because we want to hear what's going on out there. But we're looking at all fronts. We're looking at possibly the movement of bait. We're looking at the advancement of these populations in the rivers, and we're also looking at overland transport on boats and trailers and what we can do with watercraft inspection and decontamination. This is a sprinkling of a lot of information, but it goes to say that our federal partners at the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the U.S. Geological Survey, the state agencies, New York State DEC, as well as NYPA and Canals, as well as Vermont Fish and Wildlife, and the Lake Champlain Basin Program are all working together on early detection monitoring. We're looking in the lake, we're looking in the Richelieu River in Quebec, we're looking in the Champlain Canal. We're doing this with eDNA, we're doing it with electrofishing and seining, we're doing it with trawling. So we have a pretty good idea, and we have a pretty good pulse on where we think the advancing line is of the round goby infestation coming towards Lake Champlain. We have made huge advances with working with our Quebec partners through the Quebec Ministry of Environment and Departments of Fisheries and Oceans Canada. We have been north of the border exploring some of the structures on the Richelieu River, the Saint-Ours Dam, and the Chambly Canal. And we're starting to learn what their questions are and what kind of AIS mitigation measures might be implemented in the Chambly Canal to help prevent species, not just goby, from moving up the system towards Lake Champlain. So these are just some maps of some of the work that they're doing. We have regular discussions about where we're going to shift our sampling. And most recently, they caught some very small goby north of the Saint-Ours Dam, which is a big advancement up the river that they're tracking and reporting back to us. I wanted to highlight some of the work that's going on in between the field seasons. The New York State Canal Corporation has worked with New York State DEC, and they have published a round goby rapid response plan for the Champlain Canal. So what this means is that if we detect a round goby somewhere between the Hudson system or in the Champlain land cut portion between lock C1 or C12, there are different response levels that say what actions would be taken if they're discovered in what portion of the canal. And what actions could be taken would be things like double flushing locks, scheduled lockings, closing locks temporarily to treat in between them. So we have defined action at each trigger point, and right now we have revised the plan to look at how to reverse it. So what would happen if we had an invasive in Lake Champlain that's not in the Hudson River? So how would we reverse the trigger actions moving in a north to south versus just thinking about goby from south to north? So that plan is in place and is being revised and is currently being implemented. What it looks like to the public, people who are moving through the Champlain Canal, there's education and outreach and publications that explain why they may need to wait for scheduled locking, why the lock is flushed once before they're allowed to enter, and the point is to create velocity at the exit of the downstream side or downhill side of the lock to flush goby away from the entrance, refill the lock, and then let the boats go through. We have been working with the Champlain Hudson Environmental Trust. We've been very successful in submitting group proposals and priorities for funding. So the electric line that was buried under the sediment in Lake Champlain has a huge environmental trust associated with it. We proposed that an interim measure for invasive species in the Champlain Canal could be an electric barrier just for fish, not all taxa, at Lock C8. So we were able to secure over $1 million to start working with the Canal Corporation on permitting and design of a structure. And then in the Champlain Canal, we've learned from our Quebec partners what the key questions are that we need to answer before we can start looking at mitigation measures in that system, such as what AIS are there and are native species using the Champlain Canal as a pathway for movement or migration around the Champlain Dam. This is all a marathon to get us to the Water Resources Development Act, which identifies the Champlain Canal and aquatic and invasive species barrier. Working with the Army Corps of Engineers, there is an authorization there for full federal funding for a solution. And the whole point here is it's not just about the goby. So the goby is the issue that we're talking about right now. It could be about hydrilla, it could be about quagga mussel, it could be about big head or silver carp. And so we are thinking strategically about where solutions would occur at the height of the canal system. And this poor individual is getting their head knocked out multiple times. But we have completed the first phase of the study for Champlain Canal invasive species barrier. We are now entered into the second phase to design a solution. This is really critical. The Basin Program and New York DEC are co-funding this work with the Army Corps of Engineers in close collaboration with the Canal Corporation. So we think we're about 2 to 3 years out from having a design solution that would address all taxa for invasive species movement through the Champlain Canal. It may look like something like a boat lift around Lock C8 or a physical berm that we have to lift boats up and over and decontaminate, irregardless of which direction they are moving. We are in, on, around, and under the canal system learning about the structure and where invasive species may be hiding or places that need more assistance for mitigating invasive species movement. So it's all about partnership. I want to thank you before I step away here for cleaning and draining and drying your boats and following the bait fish regulations. This is really critical. We struggle with folks on the launches, and if you can help us out, folks understand what watercraft inspection and decontamination is about and the messaging, but sometimes they don't understand that we need to inspect watercraft every time they launch and every time they retrieve, even if they're just using Lake Champlain, because we have species like water chestnut in the South Lake that are not as prevalent in the North Lake, and vice versa with other invasive species. So helping us be role models about how to clean, drain, and dry boats and being the stewards of our lake would be a great help. So thank you.